Good morning, everyone. We'll start in about 1 minute. About 1 minute.
So far, Carolina, that's not.
Yeah, so I was looking forward to seeing her. Anyway, good morning. Good morning, everyone. So, good morning and welcome to the June 21st, 2024 SANDAG Joint Transportation Borders and Regional Planning Committee meeting. And I will now start the meeting and call it to order. And before we go forward, I would like to have get instructions from the interpreter on how to obtain interpretation. Please go ahead.
Announcement from the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app from a cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you're in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo y seleccione español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom desde su celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio o silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de la reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now ask our clerk, Ms. Francesca Webb, to confirm that we have a quorum with a roll call attendance.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with the Transportation Committee. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Mayor Sanchez. Present. And Rafael Perez. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Campillo.
Here.
For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Montgomery Stepp. Here. And Supervisor Anderson.
Here.
For East County, Chair Shu.
Here.
For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno present.
For North County Coastal, Vice Chair Kranz.
Here.
For North County Inland, Mayor White.
Present.
And Councilmember Musgrove.
Here.
For North County Transit District, Mayor Pro Tem Bob Patel.
Here.
For the Port of San Diego, Chairman Urtasun.
Here.
And South County is absent, and that does confirm a quorum for the Transportation Committee. For the Borders Committee, South County is absent.
She's here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Vice Chair Chavez. Oh, thank you. For East County, Councilmember Koval.
Here.
For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Present. I'm here twice.
For for the County of San Diego, Supervisor Anderson is present. Didn't I already get you? Imperial County and North County Coastal are absent, and for North County Inland, Mayor White.
Present.
And that does confirm a quorum for the Borders Committee. For the Regional Planning Committee for the City of San Diego, Chair LaCava.
Present.
For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Anderson is present. For East County, Mayor Wells.
Here.
For North County Coastal, Vice Chair Martinez.
Here.
For North County Inland, Mayor Jones.
Here.
And South County is absent, and that confirms a quorum for the Regional Planning Committee as well.
Thank you, Francesca. And I get the honor of making a introduction, but of our new CEO. I think this is your first major meeting. Is that correct? Wow. So I'd like to welcome SANDAG's new CEO, Mario also. Mario, would you like to say a few words?
Good morning to all. I'm very excited to see all of you here. I'm very excited to be here. This is my first week, so this is the first week of a journey that we will all be walking together. I will be reaching out to all of you to meet individually, to hear your concerns. It's been a busy week. Just some examples, really appreciate, got to see a little bit of the tribal summit. It was exciting. It really brought it home to me because about 20 years ago or something like that, I was one of the ones who coordinated. I think at that time was the second tribal summit when the tribes were invited to be part of the SANDAG PACs and the board. And that's something that's very special because it took us 5.5 years of discussions, negotiations, and gaining trust. And trust is very important. And that's one of my biggest efforts here, to gain the trust of all of you, gain the trust of the public. So, and that's only achieved with objective and focused work, and let the decision makers do be able to have those decisions with qualified information. So that's very important. You know, we also had the Lausanne meeting once the notice of preparations was released on the CEQA portion of it. And oh my God, I've never, in my 34 years, I've never seen a public meeting so well attended. Records show there were about 400 people who went and commented. So that gives us the idea of the level of the importance of the project that you all know it is, but how the community is addressing it. In big projects with a lot of alternatives, there's going to be a lot of comments, a lot of opinions, a lot of agreements, and a lot of disagreements. And it's part of the process. So we're really eager to move forward. We are working very hard on securing our NEPA lead so we can also begin the NEPA portion of it and put out those notice of preparations on the NEPA side. So we're excited about that. In the near future, Antoinette will be coming and giving an update on the RTP. And I think this RTP is very welcoming. I think the board and the PACs were part of the development of the options, the ideas. So that's really helping to put out a great product. So Antoinette will be coming on that. I think the team will be coming up with Alta Mesa East with some good news on agreements or, you know, getting understandings moving forward with both the federal government of in the U.S., with CBP and with Mexico. So that was also accomplished. The bike program will be probably coming to Transportation Committee. We're working very hard on having good reasons why they should be coming and solid objective information, because they may come with a budget amendment request, but they will not be coming if they don't have a solid story to say why they're coming to talk to you about that. So that's part of our token. And, you know, we're working on all of the other hot items like the implementing the ERP, the back office implementation. So in 3 days, 4 days that I've been here, I can tell you that it's quite overwhelming, the items that are going on, but very, very excited and appreciative of all your support and the welcoming and being this my first major meeting. And I think something that's going to be very important in me trying to facilitate the discussion, how the PACs, how the policy advisory committees like transportation, borders, and regional planning and others can really help the board of directors get into those discussions deep. So the board of directors also has, through the PACs, somebody that's floating up issues and also maybe catching up items before they should go to the board. So that is the purpose of the PACs. So really, thank you, and I will stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mario. That was great. So welcome, and this will be probably the largest meeting or a group of people I've ever chaired. So I want to start out by thanking the production staff for putting it together, Betsy, Grace, and Antoinette for helping me get ready. We'll see how well they prepared me. So with that, welcome all of you to this great meeting. I think we're going to have a great meeting with many things to cover, and hopefully we'll get out on time. I want to first recognize the other two committees that are here. I want to our regional planning chair, Joe LaCava, and regional planning committee members that are here. Chair LaCava, would you like to say any words?
Thank you, Chair. Just to be very brief, I'm very honored to be the chair of the Regional Planning Committee, doing that for the first time this year. For those of you who don't know me, I represent District 1 in the city of San Diego, which is our coastal district, which means I represent Pacific Beach that practices all forms of mobility, biking, walking. We have a micro-mobility in the beach bug. We have great transit. We have access to the trolley, all the way up to Carmel Valley, which has none of that, but an awful lot of traffic congestion going forward. So I got a good background in that, as well as my formal training as a civil engineer. But I want to give a shout out to all the committee members in addition to your regular duties as elected officials, you take the time to participate in SANDAG, which I find extremely important. And if I was paying attention closely enough to the roll call, some of you have single, double, and triple duty on these various committees, and I appreciate you taking the time to participate. All of us have to really get in and dig in to really come up with the solutions we need to serve our region going forward. So thank you all for your valuable and understanding of what public service really means. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. I also want to thank Borders Vice Chair Carolina Chavez and the Borders Committee for being here. So Vice Chair Chavez, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Chu, and members of the Transportation Committee and the Regional Planning Committee. Thank you for being our host today. But before we continue, I want to acknowledge that these new topics that are incorporated in the regional plan are very important. Of course, from a borders perspective, health and safety, flexible fleets, and advanced air mobility are key to understanding our region from the three borders perspectives: international, interregional, and with native tribes. On behalf of the Borders Committee, I want to offer our full interest and support for today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go on to non-agendized public comment.
Excuse me, Chair. Are we going to have a tribal acknowledgement and a pledge of allegiance this morning?
I don't have a tribal acknowledgement statement for this morning. Normally, I don't do it at the committee meetings for our committee, although I have said it in other public meetings before.
No pledge of allegiance? Okay.
So do we have any, we'll go on to public comments. Well, let me go on with what we normally say before we take public comments. As a reminder, no comments shall be loud, threatening, profane, or abusive language that disrupts the orderly conduct of the meeting will be tolerated. Any such language or any other disorderly conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the committee meeting is prohibited. Per SANDAG board policy, the amount of time allowed for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comments. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have a quorum. Based on those factors for today's meeting, and given the longer agenda, each member of the public will be allowed 1 minute for their comments. So with that, Francesca, do we have any members of the public that want to make a general comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. First, I'll call Truth up to the podium, and Truth will be followed by Blair Beekman.
All right, I'm going to cover it. Rebecca, Jackdavis had his own version of the pledge of the Tribal Summit, and I agreed with this sentiment, but here's the problem. I pledge allegiance to my country, not to any of the Indian countries, and I don't expect them to pledge allegiance to our country unless they want to. Now, I have many truth bombs to spit, but I'm going to save it for next week's meeting. Let's see. Do you think equity is important? Should all areas of the county have equal access to all modes of transportation? Well, that's not going to happen for East County, not just the obvious omission of projects for the backcountry, but instead of just double tracking the 1 mile in between Gillespie and Santee to increase the trolley speeds, MTS is just going to go, you know what? Screw you people. We're going to make you do another transfer to get where you need to go. And that is going to make people's time about 30 minutes to an hour longer. Now, do you think they're going to continue to take the trolley if they have that much more time added to their trip? No, they're going to take a 15-minute drive. They're going to get to wherever they need to go. And then you had MTS in their statistical analysis. It said, quote, there could be a disproportionate burden to low-income populations to result from the copper line, far higher than the system-wide average, end quote. What equity?
Our next speaker will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks for the meeting today. Thanks for the words from the new CEO about the idea of creating transparency ideas with more emphasis on the future of the committee process. Thank you for that. I'm interested, I missed the Tribal Summit meeting. I was up in the San Francisco Bay Area cleaning my storage space. So Sean Oliveira of City of San Diego mentioned that as important and helpful as the summit was, something was clear to him that we have to be sure to line up our best practices with the future of tribal commission issues. That may fall out of whack, and we got to be sure to get that together and that we're working together in the future. I really like tech accountability ideas and guidelines that can really help with the broadband process for the future tribal issues. Really check it out. I think it's really helpful work for all of us. Thank you.
That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you. Before we take public comments from any members here, I do want to honor the traditions of other committees, and the Pledge of Allegiance is something that the other committees, I understand, do say at the beginning of the meetings. So please join me in giving the Pledge of Allegiance now. Thank you. Do we have any non-agendized item comments from any of our members here? This is all three committee members. Seeing no hands raised, move on. Thank you.
Chair Shu,
Yes,
I just want to acknowledge that we are in Kumeyaay land. Thank you.
thank you. We are. Thank you. Well, we now have to do some business, and this business is just for the Transportation Committee. This business only deals with Transportation Committee members who can vote on these items, and we'll be able to deal with this, and then we'll go on to the rest of the agenda. So this is for items number 2 through 8. I'm moving to consent agenda items. Are there any members of the Transportation Committee that would like to pull an item from 2 through 8? Seeing no hands raised, no items will be pulled. Do we have any public comments on any consent items?
Thank you, Chair. We do. Truth, if you'd like to step back up to the podium, and Truth will be followed by Blair Beekman.
All right, item 2, Esther was late by 21 minutes, and there's an extra comma on page 8. Item 3, only about $1 million for public transit from MTS and NCTD for the rural areas, more inequity. Item 4, FACT's work plan includes attending city council. It's not plural, so any particular city. And what about planning groups to cover the rural areas? Item 7, transportation tactics puts the blue line trolley together with a non-existent purple line. Why? And why are existing green and orange lines not monitored for air quality issues? Why isn't there a breakdown of safety events so everyone can see what the issues actually are? And why are public transit trips calculated with a round trip price? Don't people have to come back home? And if ITALK's supposed to be the Citizens Oversight Committee of people's tax dollars, then why aren't there meetings at a time that normal people can actually attend? Also, I don't approve of all the tracking of people's trips, cars, eating habits, and spare time. Item 8, MTS's stats show that since 2022, the YOP program has encouraged a culture of unpaid transit to take shape to the tune of 27%, and 9 million rides equates to $22.5 million in lost revenue. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Yeah, tech accountability guidelines and practices really help with just open communication and dialogue. It does some really amazing stuff. Good luck in how we work on issues of open dialogue together in the coming year. I wanted to speak on items 3 and 8, federal, state and federal transportation issues and reporting and such. I have serious concerns that state and federal agencies, they've spent a lot of time in the past few years dumping tons of new technology into local California cities when we already have a lot of technology in place. If nothing else, I understand the concepts of updating tech, but we have to acknowledge that there's already a lot of tech in place and it already is solving our crime issues. We don't need tons more. And we have to be clear on those sort of conversations about our tech in the future. And with that, the data collection practices of ARGIS, we have to be monitoring that. We have to learn how to make, attempts to regulate it, and that it can be, there can.
Thank you. Your time has expired, and that concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you, Francesca. Do we have any other comments or questions from any transportation board members? Esther, yeah.
Move approval.
Moved by Esther. Do I have a seconded by Monica Wangari Step? And I think for those transportation committee members, we have our little clicker so we can vote by clicker. Airport Authority. There we go.
That motion does pass with 8 yeses, 1 abstention, and 1 absence.
My vote, I was trying to make as yes. My apologies.
We can correct the voting slide later.
Thank you. Said invalid, sorry.
So that completes the consent item. So with the completion of the consent item, we'll move on to the rest of the agenda. The agenda topics today are focused on new policies and programs in the regional plan. The first item is on the agenda is a 2-part presentation by 2 new related policies in the 2025 regional plan, health and safety. The first part of this item will focus on the public health, and we have a special panel of experts who will talk about the health impacts associated with transportation and the built environment. After the panelists give their presentations, we'll leave it open for questions and answers with the panel before moving on to the second policy area, which is safety. After the presentation on safety, we will open up for public and member comments. So thank you both. You will now have, I'm sorry, we both, thank you both. We will now hand it over to Antoinette to introduce the items and our special guests.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Good morning. It's great to bring all the Policy Advisory Committee members together again. It was about a year ago when we met at Caltrans and we held a workshop on the initial concept, the transportation network for the 2025 regional plan. We're also focused on the regional plan today, but not on the projects and the infrastructure, on key policies and programs. So as the Chair mentioned, 2 new policies were added to the regional plan based on board direction, and that's health and safety. So this is a 2-part agenda item. We're going to kick it off with health. The board adopted a resolution about 6 or so months ago, last fall, directing staff to make healthy communities and the environment a priority in the 2025 regional plan. As a result of that, this was added as both a goal in the regional plan and a new policy area. And there's a number of programs and projects that we're implementing under that policy area to improve air quality and increase physical activity. So for the discussion today, we've brought together a panel of outside experts who specialize in air quality and public health and the impacts of the built environment on health. 2 of our panelists are with us in person, and 1 is going to be joining us online, and I'll introduce them in just a moment. As the Chair mentioned, there'll be a facilitated kind of Q&A after the first part of the agenda item is over with the panel, and then we're going to switch gears and talk about safety. Safety became a new policy and goal in the regional plan also because the board adopted a resolution directing staff to develop a Vision Zero action plan, to develop a safety data portal, and to prioritize safety in all of our planning efforts. And a lot of work has been done over the last couple of years to implement that resolution. So Sam Sanford, who is a member of our planning department and an expert in traffic safety, will give an update on the work to implement that Vision Zero action plan, develop and implement it. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists. It's an honor to have them here today. First, we'll be hearing from Domingo Vigil. He is the Deputy Director at the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District, where he oversees the Monitoring and Technical Services Division and the Office of Environmental Justice. And this includes implementing the Community Air Protection Program, AB 617, to improve air quality in communities that are disproportionately burdened by air pollution. After Domingo, we will turn it over to Dr. Birkbeck Garcia, who's a pediatric hospital medicine physician physician who serves on the APCD's governing board, and her focus is on caring for premature infants and children with complex medical needs, and she's a strong advocate for preventative care. Dr. Burbick also grew up in Southeast San Diego and the border community of Otay Mesa. And then last, we'll hear from Dr. Larry Frank, who will join us over Zoom. Dr. Frank is a UCSD professor and top planning academic in North America, specializing in the interaction between land use, transportation, air quality, and health. And he's done a lot of work with public agencies on the application of health-based evidence in transportation decision-making. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Domingo to kick us off.
Thank you, Antoinette. Good morning, Chair Shu and committee members and members of the public. It's an honor to be here with all of you today and to share this space with my fellow panelists. In the next few slides, I will like to touch a little bit on the regional air quality for the County of San Diego, and then I will also zoom in a little bit more into the international border communities of San Isidro and Otay Mesa, highlight some of the work that we're doing there in partnership with a number of agencies, including SANDAG. And so with this, I will go ahead and start my presentation. APCD's mission is to improve air quality to protect health and the environment of the region. The region has made important strides to reduce air pollution, and as a result, air quality in the San Diego region currently meets 5 of the 6 health-based standards or limits set by the US EPA, as shown here on the table. Air quality standards are set to protect the health of the public and prevent any adverse health impacts that can be caused by elevated levels of pollution. Ozone is the only air pollutant in the region that does not meet the respective standards. Ozone pollution, also known as smog, is formed when emissions from motor vehicles, industrial plants, consumer products, and other sources interact under the influence of sunlight and heat. When inhaled, ozone irritates the lungs and can trigger health problems such as chest pain, coughing, and shortness of breath. Looking at air quality at the regional level only tells us part of the story, but if we really want to have a complete picture, we need to look at the air quality at different communities at the community level, because air quality doesn't affect all communities the same way. The map that you see on the screen is a screenshot from CalEnviro Screen, a mapping tool developed by the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment to rank census tracts in the state based on socioeconomic, health, and environmental variables. The darker shades highlight the most pollution-burdened communities. Today, I would like to highlight the international border community comprised of San Isidro and Otay Mesa East. So zooming into this community, you can see on the map the census tracts that are comprised by this community. And so at the direction of Assembly Bill 617, the California Air Resources Board established the Community Air Protection Program, or CAP. The CAP focuses on reducing exposure to air pollutants in the most impacted communities in the state. On February of 2022, the San Diego International Border Community, which includes San Isidro and East Otay Mesa, as shown on the map, was selected to participate in the program. The International Border Community has the highest traffic burden in the state of California, and the pollution burden for ultra-fine particulate matter, which is small enough to go unfiltered deep into the lungs, is higher than 95% of census tracts in the state. Implementation of the CAP requires community and multi-agency engagement and partnership, enhanced community-level air quality monitoring, and the development and implementation of emission reduction strategies. SDAPCD has convened an International Border Steering Committee, a multi-sector group with a majority of community residents and with participation from community-based organizations, local jurisdictions, regional planning agencies, industry, and academia. Over the past 2 years, SDAPCD and the Community Steering Committee co-developed a community air monitoring plan to identify air monitoring needs and potential locations to deploy monitoring equipment, as well as a community emissions reduction plan, or CERP, which includes a suite of strategies to reduce emissions and improve public health. The CERP has been approved by the SDAPCD Governing Board, and it's awaiting approval by the California Air Resources Board. There are 5 key areas that the Community Steering Committee identified as community priorities in its Community Emissions Reduction Plan. First, reduce exposure to emissions from passenger vehicles at the border and throughout the community. San Isidro has more passenger vehicle volume traveling on the streets and freeways than anywhere else in the state of California. Second, reduce emissions and emission exposure from heavy-duty trucks traveling to and from warehouses in Otay Mesa and beyond to protect the health of people living along truck routes on both sides of the border. According to the Bureau of Transportation's border crossing data, close to 92,000 inbound trucks were processed in the month of May of 2023 at the Otay Mesa port of entry. Third, reduce emissions and odors from sources in Tijuana, such as sewage in the Tijuana River, burning of trash, and industrial-related activities. Fourth, reduce emissions from border patrol activity on the west side of San Isidro, freight transit going through the heart of San Isidro, the Brownfield Municipal Airport in Otay Mesa, and Tijuana's International Airport, Abelardo L. Rodriguez. And last but not least, protect children, elderly, chronically ill, and other groups that are vulnerable to air pollution exposure. Addressing all these priorities requires close collaboration with multiple agencies. For example, as the APCD has limited regulatory authority over mobile sources of pollution, such as vehicles, but it is our hope that SANDAG can be a partner to implement some of the strategies in the SERP that are under SANDAG's purview. All of the strategies have been previously vetted by SANDAG, Caltrans, and the State of Baja's transportation planning agencies through previous planning efforts, including the California-Baja California Border Master Plan, San Diego and Imperial County's Sustainable Freight Implementation Strategy, Zero Emission Freight Transportation White Paper, and the 2021 SANDAG Regional Transportation Plan. Before I conclude, I'd like to share a 1-minute video that includes testimonials from community members regarding their lived experiences with air pollution at the border. These powerful voices provide a window into the daily lives of the community members and how air pollution affects their health and quality of life. If I can get staff's assistance with playing the video, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, I'll owe you the video. I can email it to staff to then share it with everybody.
Yeah.
We look forward to continuing our collaboration with SANDAG to integrate the strategies identified in the International Border Community Emissions Reduction Plan into SANDAG's upcoming regional plan. This concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Good morning, everyone. As Antoinette said, I'm Dr. Anne Marie Birkbeck Garcia, Chair Shu, and all committee members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come speak to you today. What I'm going to do today is talk about health impacts of our regional air quality. Toxic air pollutants are things that are caused by consumption and production of gas and oil products. The ones that we focus on most is PM2.5. These are very, very small molecules that can travel deep into our respiratory tract and reach our bloodstream. And I'll talk about all of these a little bit more later. I'm going to focus mostly on PM2.5 though. Nitrogen oxide, also known as NOx, is emitted by diesel vehicles and equipment. Sulfur oxide is emitted by power plants and diesel vehicles, and it reacts with the atmosphere. So that actually forms additional PM2.5. And then carbon monoxide, we have the highest concentration of this along the roadsides in heavy traffic. But the important thing also to know is it reduces the transport of oxygen in our body as well. Oops. So a Harvard study on mortality statistics related to air pollution. In the US, air pollution is attributed to 350,000 premature deaths. More than 8 million people worldwide in 2018 died from fossil fuel pollution, which is roughly the population of New York City. And air pollution has been attributed to 1 in 5 deaths worldwide. So this is a worldwide issue, but that we all need to look into. So there's a lot of research out there. PM 2.5 can cause increased risks of death from cardiovascular disease, so heart attacks, strokes. It can cause decline in lung function, so increase in lung cancer, development of asthma, and puts people at risk of getting chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. Diabetes. So people think about heart attacks, they think about strokes, they think about lung issues, but also type 2 diabetes. What a lot of people don't realize is air pollution also contributes to psychiatric or mood disorders such as depression and anxiety, childhood obesity. If you can't breathe, you can't go outside and play. You can't go outside and play and you don't move, you don't burn calories, you sit. We also see an increase in lower birth weight and infant mortality. In 2019, nearly 500,000 newborns died worldwide as a result of air pollution exposure. And there has been a study that's linking prenatal exposure and autism. So I have a brief video here that I think can put things into words better than I can. Can I get assistance playing with this? Thank you. Can I get, oh, there, oops, how do I go back a slide? Thank you. So here are some statistics from the American Thoracic Society from 2023. These are some county numbers on health impacts in our county. We're 13th for PM 2.5 mortality. We're 9th in the nation for adverse birth outcomes from air pollution. We're 8th for ozone mortality and 15th for lung cancer incidence. This is an environmental justice issue as well. Of our communities in San Diego, and I got this from the Cal Environ screen, 89% of our impacted communities are Black, Latino, Indigenous, or Pacific Islanders, where the least impacted communities in San Diego County are 72% white. Health risks from air pollution are higher in our environmental justice neighborhoods. In our Portside community, our children's asthma and ER visit rates for the recent year were 2.5 times the region-wide average. This is from CARB. I just took the screenshot from CARB. In 2017, the total cancer risk came 84% from diesel particulate matter. And as Domingo mentioned, our border community is at a very high risk. We have one of the busiest land border crossings in the Western Hemisphere. 41% of the residents that live in San Isidro are within 200 steps of a pollution source. To give you guys perspective, I live in a 1,500 square foot house. This morning, just getting up, going to the bathroom, serving myself a cup of tea, I put in 354 steps. The asthma rates in this community are also 18 times higher than the national average. And according to EPA and Cal Environs screening, our border community, the census tract that is our border community here in California, has a 68 to 78% higher asthma rate. Their cardiovascular disease rate is 68 to 80% higher. And their lifetime cancer risk from inhalation of air toxins are higher than 95% of other communities nationwide. So just a little food for thought for you guys, just some numbers, and I'll be happy once we're done talking to answer any questions you may have.
Good morning. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Dr. Frank.
Okay. I foremost really appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning about the built environment impacts on health. Appreciate the wonderful talk by the previous two speakers. Thank you, Chair Shu, for including me today, and SANDAG staff for supporting this talk. First, we shape our built environment, then it shapes us. That's kind of the theme of my talk. I've been working on this topic for about a third of a century. Really happy to be at UCSD. Next slide, please. So chronic disease burden in the US is massive. Over 2/3 of adults are overweight or obese. Obesity is among the largest modifiable factor for diabetes, hypertension, coronary heart disease, cancer, asthma, depression, and musculoskeletal disorders, to name a few. If the current trends continue, 42% will be obese and 11% will be severely obese by 2030, really soon. A 33% increase in obesity prevalence and 130% overall increase in chronic disease disorders. Those words got deleted. Nearly all African-American women and Mexican-American men are projected to be overweight, 91%, 97 and 91% respectively, to be overweight or obese by 2030. So what's the role of the built environment? Well, the built environment affects how active we are through our travel patterns. It affects how much carbon and GHG emissions we generate, and it affects our health in many ways, as clearly conveyed by the previous two speakers, in proximity to transportation infrastructure and travel, where emissions are. You can see the impact that was just presented. However, on the physical activity side, and lack thereof, time in cars. So 20 years ago, I did a study that really got global attention on how time in cars, sedentary behavior, causes obesity. So an hour in a car is a 6% increase in the likelihood of obesity. Conversely, walking and active transportation, which does happen with transit use, and just creating communities where we can actually do at least some of our daily meet some of our daily needs on foot, reduces obesity and chronic disease, as would intuitively be obvious through physical activity, burning calories. A kilometer, or about 0.6 of a mile walked, reduces the likelihood of obesity by 5%. Next slide, please. So here we go. So I will beg your forgiveness for a little bit of a technical walk through the causal pathway, but it's actually fairly simple, and it builds perfectly on the previous two presentations. On the left are 4 different sets of decisions that you all make through your jobs at SANDAG and other ways you're impacting communities through your service. Transportation infrastructure, clearly where we build infrastructure and the type of infrastructure, what mode we build in, definitely affects people's behavior. So does the land use decisions that go with that. Transportation and land use go hand in hand. Pedestrian environment features is critical. You can have transit service, you can have density at stations, but if the pedestrian environment, the seating, the lighting, the street furniture, the sidewalks, and all of that is not there, you're not going to get the behavior, you're not going to get access to transit. We need those investments, and they are relatively cheap. Green space, critical. All of that affects travel and activity patterns that through that affect our behaviors and exposures. I don't know, I don't have control of a cursor, but I'm moving from left to right, so behaviors and exposures. So here we're talking about what people eat, but really physical activity that I just described. And then also, let's not forget, we're in an era where social isolation is now a primary focus of the Surgeon General. Through the pandemic, we have now come to realize with an aging population and others, this is a crisis. There's been major focus on this. So the type of environment we live in, if we have the ability to walk in our communities, we're going to be able to meet our neighbors and develop relationships. Exposures, though, that's what the previous two presentations focused on: air pollution, traffic safety and crime and noise. Behaviors and exposures that are affected by the features on the left impact us biologically, as was clearly conveyed through the previous talk. Biological responses are greater than just the ones mentioned so far, include, of course, weight. Body weight, inflammation, and stress interact through space and time to affect chronic disease, both physical and mental. These are all measurable. We've been documenting, me and other researchers through the years. There's a lot of published evidence on this topic. That all affects, most importantly, perhaps for decision-making, is the bottom line. Healthcare cost, healthcare utilization, workforce productivity, all of these things are critical and are directly impacted by the decisions that you make in your investments, and they are massive. They are actually bigger through time and cost than the infrastructure decision-making dollars that you're making. Next slide, please. So there are three buckets of investments that you do make. Of course, I showed a few before, but this is another way to kind of break it apart into macro and micro. You make decisions about transit, major infrastructure, how we get around the region, complete communities, live, work, play. That's what we call walkability, a term I've been using a long time. So complete communities, of course, is important, the land use, but on the right, the pedestrian environment. This is really where I think we can also make a lot of gain in promoting physical activity quite a bit through relatively cost-effective investments in targeted locations. Next slide, please. So these maps were ones we made for the Healthy Communities Atlas for SANDAG in 2012. Around then, maybe 2013. Composite maps, I can explain more. I have all of this. This is a quick overview today, just a few slides, but have much more detail on how these factors, the walkability of communities, the destinations, the proximity, the density, the connectivity of the road network, all of that, including pedestrian environment features, affects health. On the right is the transportation infrastructure, and I can discuss more later what these maps entail, but they were included for a SANDAG product some time ago. Next slide, please. So here's a predicted model that we made of moderate and vigorous physical activity. You will note that the dark blue areas are the same areas that in the previous map I just showed of walkability and supportive transportation infrastructure, sidewalks and other facilities, bikeways to support active transportation. So we're quite capable at the micro level of mapping and also synchronizing this information with air pollution exposure data. Of course, there's a problem if you encourage people to be very active in places where air pollution is the worst. That is a problem too, but we're already we know that the solutions lie in reducing car dependence and in making vehicle fleets cleaner. Next slide, please. Here we go. Okay, so this is a continuum from the most car dependent on the left to the most walkable on the right. I use this a lot to simplify kind of the way to think about walkability. Here I've put 5 buckets of walkability. Bottom line is that if we move from the most car dependent to perhaps somewhat car dependent or even somewhat walkable, moving up the staircase gets huge benefits without having to become super urban. And we have a lot of evidence to show that, and I'll provide some next. So next slide, please. So here, following that same 5-level staircase, compared to those in the most car-dependent environments, those in moderately walkable were 27%, and those in walkable environments, 39% less likely to have diabetes than those in the most car-dependent environment. So we already know, and this is published in the top journals, we've been measuring these relationships for quite a long time. We're quite aware of the fact that yes, indeed, the more walkable and less car-dependent our environments are, the lower some of the chronic disease rates are. However, for the most underserved populations, it's not always the case. The air pollution exposure that comes with more urbanized areas that can be more walkable in terms of density actually attenuates these responses. No matter, these findings show that overall walkability, even with the air pollution it may come with at times, still gets us health benefits, but we still need to clean up our air for sure. Next slide, please. So here's how we actually take some of the evidence. On the left, you see factors about the physical environment. First of all, who we are as people. Our demographics matter a lot. We take those into account. We then take into account the features of the built environment. I just showed a few. We run statistical models that spatially join those factors with health outcome data from the California Health Interview Survey of 40,000 people roughly a year. We've been building software tools for the last 20 years, built a couple that were used earlier by SANDAG or tested by SANDAG, and the National Public Health Assessment model has now been used nationally in 14 regions. These models are helping regional planning organizations determine how to reduce chronic disease impact in their metropolitan planning, long-range plans, but in other ways. And there's other tools around too. Lots of different researchers are working in this area. These are some of the outcomes you see on the right. I won't read them all in the interest of time. I think you get the idea probably, but the fact is that we can take the data directly simulate in the decision-making process health impacts. Next slide, please. So here's one. This was done and published recently in 2022. This was done about 10 years earlier. Palomar Gateway. We modeled the effect if the plan that that community had developed around the train station along the trolley comes into fruition, the health effects and benefits. And since you all know the geography of the region so well, I don't really need to say too much other than it's market forces, of course, and other factors that affect the densification around transit and regulatory limitations. But this was what was in the plan. We modeled it. Next slide, please. Here's what we found. 68% increase in the amount of minutes of active transportation for adults, a 15.4% reduction in high blood pressure, 9.6% reduction in type 2 diabetes, and for youth, 29% increase in walking to school, 18% increase in daily minutes of active transportation. However, also predicted increases in asthma because some of the locations also incorporated, and we directly measured in this study, proximity to highly trafficked roads and air pollution exposure is what we were capturing. So here we have a result showing that's what it affected using outcome data from the survey, the health interview survey. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we are seeing some big opportunities taking back the streets. Through the pandemic, communities seem more receptive to reappropriating road space in some of the neighborhoods. I hope that can move forward. That would be a major step forward for us, and your leadership in that is appreciated, and I know you're working to make some of these opportunities happen. And we have measured and shown, I don't have time today, quantified before and after effects. Greenways, making streets more walkable, transferring some of the space to other modes from cars really works. We've got causal evidence to show it. Next slide, please. So real quick, the top row is walkability. We've been measuring it through time in the region, 2014, 2021, and how much places are changing. Social vulnerability as well, air pollution exposure. I believe, and one of the kind of summary comments for me is that tracking how our communities are changing, this is at the block group level, smaller than tracked, which I think is important. Tracking how our communities are changing is really important. It gives us the ability to understand the land use decision-making that's happening on the ground and how exposures and social forces are changing. We know that walkable environments are becoming more expensive. the more underserved are being displaced into places less accessible. Next slide, please. So here's my conclusion. Transportation investments and land use actions impact health through changes in our behaviors and exposures. The most underserved live in areas with the worst air pollution are also being displaced to less walkable and less accessible locations. Evidence-based tools are increasingly being used to predict health, equity, and economic impacts of transportation investments. That's an option. Criteria used to prioritize transportation projects should directly address predicted health, equity, and social justice impacts. Tracking changes to features of the built environment known to impact public health over time will increase awareness and lead to more sustainable and healthier decision-making. Thank you.
I want to thank all three panelists. That was really, it was a great presentations, but I must say I took pause many times because I know what we're hearing is affecting our communities, the people we serve, and much of it is very disturbing. So thank you all three panelists. I want to give some time for quick questions from our committee members, all three committee members and our advisors, but please make it quick because we don't have a lot of time. We have a few more presentations to go today. So any quick questions for our three panelists? Mayor Jones.
I have a quick question. So a lot of people, and there's a lot of data out there. I can't really refer to it right now, but a lot of health impacts are also based on diet and eating right, and that sort of thing, on top of exercising, getting plenty of exercise. So I'm just wondering, how was a healthy diet taken into account with all of this other data, or was it?
Yes, so I actually have on my slides, so if you get a copy of my presentation, I have all the literature on there. So each impact, their studies, and they do take into account diet, exercise, in addition to the air pollutions. But there were, for each statistic, there were anywhere from 1 to 3 different studies, and I don't have all that. I didn't bring the piles of literature with me. I'm sorry.
That would make sense. I mean, we do know that inflammation was referred to several times, I think. And inflammation is really impacted by the amount of food that you consume that's processed versus whole food, more food that's grown out of the ground and not highly processed. So I bring this up because I learned a lot about diet and how it affects you, because my ex-husband had cancer. And so we had to change everything about how we ate and all of that. And it made, in his health, it made a very big difference in his health overall, almost as much as him actually getting exercise. So I just wanted to bring that up. So I'm glad that that was taken into account, because I do know for a fact that it actually makes a big difference. So thank you.
Yes, it does make a big difference, but we also have to take into consideration that a lot of these communities don't have the ability to get fresh foods, have a completely plant-based diet. Sometimes it's cheaper to go get a value meal somewhere than it is to get, a plant-based diet. And I am 100% for plant-based diet. Plant-based diets are the only thing that have proven reversing the risks of cardiovascular disease.
Kind of study, yes, definitely. One thing I mean, this is kind of a little bit off topic, though, and this is one of the things in our affordable housing areas I've actually brought up to the developers. I think that having a significant amount of healthy eating and explaining, because you don't know what you know. I mean, I was talking about it earlier. When I was a kid, I didn't know what healthy eating was. And so I think, education on that is a big part of it. And I think, medical communities are looking more at that, because, there's so many people on all these different medications. You have to take all these different medications to counteract the other effects. But your body can actually do a lot with just eating right and having that healthy food, and not necessarily plant-based, just more non-processed sorts of food. So anyway, point well taken. I would love to see those studies, because I think it's an important part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. Any other questions? Commissioner Tassin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I took special note of the air emissions presentation that you gave. The Port of San Diego obviously has significant operations in close proximity to some of those areas. I guess my question really is, in breaking out the emissions that are associated with different sources, what percentage of your analysis was emissions coming from the I-5 corridor as compared to the rest of the sources?
I don't have that information off the top of my head. I'm happy to share it as a follow-up, but it's definitely an important source because actually, if you look at it both region-wide and at the community level, a great majority of the pollution is coming from mobile sources. So whether these are cars and trucks on the streets or off the freeways, also the proximity of communities to the freeways also impacts a lot of their air quality because of all the vehicle traffic that you get from those. So it's certainly a big percentage of it. I don't have the exact number right now.
I agree with you. I suspect that it's a large number. The areas that you identified as being very impacted, both you and Dr. Garcia, is Barrio, San Isidro, Otay Mesa, areas that are impacted greatly by automobile corridors going right through there, right?
Absolutely. And it also depends on the type of pollutant that you're looking at. There are some other pollutants that would be more attributable to stationary sources of pollution. But in general terms, just looking at air quality in general, mobile sources are a big contributor.
Great. I haven't been looking to the right. I'm going to start moving this way again. So, Chair Krantz.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the presentation, and I would like to ask that we get these three presentations included in the record, whether it be sent via email, but I think it's valuable to have this on the website. Very interesting. I would like to acknowledge my contribution to the obesity rates going up. I fit in that category. It comes from habits that I learned when I was young. While I participated in sports, daily exercise wasn't a big part of my lifestyle. So now I have a sedentary job, sit at a desk pretty much all day long. But recently I've been cycling much more with the ability to ride an e-bike. I know that's not as good as riding a regular cycle. I think they call it a acoustic cycle, but it's better than nothing. And I understand it does contribute to getting some exercise. Occasionally I ride on the brand new facility that was built as part of the San Elias Lagoon I-5 bridge widening project. And the beautiful new bike facility is adjacent to the freeway. And it does make me wonder, based upon the statistics, whether riding a bike in a corridor, in the freeway corridor is, significantly detrimental to our health. And anecdotally, I will say that I have a former colleague, Jody Hubbard, who was elected to the city council in 2018, who was very fit and quite athletic, got exercise regularly, was a body surfer, and she died of lung cancer and happened to live near the freeway as well. So just a lot of questions about our built environment. This city of Encinitas acquired 40 acres for a community park right adjacent to the freeway. So we're gathering people right in the areas to exercise where maybe it's not the smartest thing to do. So there's no easy solution to that particular problem. And while the communities surrounding the port are clearly most impacted, I would point out that the city of Encinitas, with both a interstate freeway of 8 lanes plus and a railroad corridor which has freight trains that are pretty dirty running in it, is is very impactful as well. So thanks for the opportunity to make comments.
Thank you, Mayor Krantz. Chair LaCava.
Thank you, Chair Shu. I want to thank staff for bringing these panelists that cuts across all three of our committees. Thank you for that, and to the panelists for speaking up today. Trying to keep it short, I'll ask one question and I'll direct it to Dr. Frank. One of the challenges we have as elected officials is the pressure to create more housing and to create more housing in our walkable neighborhoods, infill development. And yet what we hear today is some of those communities are most impacted by air pollution. So while we struggle to figure out how do we solve the air quality issue for people that live there today, it raises the question, should we increase the amount of residents in those communities that are highly impacted and have such awful health trends going forward? And I think you spoke a little bit, you touched on a little bit in one of your later slides when you looked at an examination of revisiting land uses within proximity to a trolley. So you have the advantage of studying. We have the disadvantage of having to make these hard decisions. What is your guidance to us about how we balance increasing the amount of housing and affordable housing while putting people in areas that we know have the poor air quality and could affect their long-term health?
Thank you for the question. Can you hear me? I'm just making.
Yes.
Okay. I think it's imperative that we focus housing in the infill areas around transit. There's no other logical, rational way to build a livable, sustainable region. The results on the health side are clear that the physical activity benefits, at least diabetes, cardiovascular disease, take into account air pollution exposure. And even for the more underserved population, it still makes more, it still resonates. It's clear that the health benefits of being in a place where you're not car dependent are greater overall, because we see the results. The data is tracking chronic disease variation without netting out the effect of air pollution is absorbed into those results, and you're still seeing benefits. However, we haven't, I mean, cancer rates haven't been as well studied. In relation to built environment, we're just starting to work on that topic more. There's been a limit of the amount of, there's reasons that's a little bit more difficult to study. It takes more time. There's some technical, analytical limitations on the cancer findings but anyways, you can see the results are very clear, but all the more reason to clean up the air where you're focusing growth. There's no other way to build a region that people can be less car dependent without focusing growth around transit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Domingo.
Thank you. May I add just a very quick comment? Also looking at environmental justice and equity, taking a look at those communities where industrial land uses are right next to residential uses and making sure that there are buffer land uses in between so that the exposure to those communities is mitigated. A lot of the root issues for environmental justice communities is in discriminatory planning practices that are rooted in racial discrimination. So really taking a look at race and at equity as part of the planning process and how those variables are taken into account to benefit the communities is also a key issue, because those are the communities that are being most affected.
Thank you. Let me move on to Chair Chavez.
Thank you. And thank you for that great presentation. I've been waiting for it for years just to be this level of specific. I remember, and Hector Venegas can correct me, but maybe 8 or 9 years ago, we heard about some tons of contamination and pollution at the border crossing. It was something brief that we heard. And since then, I've been asking for this presentation because it's so detrimental for the people in South Bay to talk about this. When I read and you were talking about the border communities, our toxic cancer risk are 95 to 100% higher than in other communities nationwide. This is alarming.
this is devastating. Why are we not talking and emphasizing about this? I have to emphasize enough on how much South Bay is being impacted by air pollution, how much in terms of equity, we have been historically overlooked. Our border communities, our students, our shared workforce, and then you cross and then you stay another hour in traffic. So that add that to the study as well. And we're not even contemplating what's generating on that side of the border and what are we not sharing the air. So we need to work these factors into our holistic solutions when we're talking about opening the 125, when we're talking about cutting back traffic. I think we need to specifically come back to this. Again, we have been historically overlooked, and I want to thank you so much for this presentation. I do want to ask, how is this going to be incorporated into the regional plan?
So thank you for that. As I mentioned earlier, we created a brand new policy area in the regional plan around public health. And under that policy area, there are a variety of programs and projects aimed at improving air quality, increasing physical activity. So everything from the transition to clean transportation, zero emission trucks, active transportation improvements, transit improvements. It's a very holistic approach to addressing public health in the regional plan.
I appreciate it, but before I go, I want to specify that because of the air toxic cancer risk are 95 to 100% higher than in other communities nationwide. I want to see something specific for South Bay. Thank you.
I think, Council Member, also as an agency, we can look into some best practices, right? And the state developed a best practice of a master plan for transportation that became the baseline both for the northern and the southern border for the federal government. It wouldn't be foreign that, again, this region takes the lead together with our partners where we embark into an analysis on environmental opportunities. But when you look for opportunities, you have to look what's impacting you, right? To find the opportunity where we would go into something similar like a master plan, but the border master plan, but for environmental areas where we can have a joint discussion in the sub-region, the region, and with our partners in down south, where we can acknowledge the short, which we know, the short-term areas of opportunity that need to be addressed, acknowledge what are the issues, but also start looking into the mid and long term. That will allow us on this side to also present our challenges to our federal funding agencies, as well as our partners down south to do the same so they can start correcting. So like you said, we share the air, we share the water, we share the river floors, and some of them are impacting heavily. So this type of presentations put even a higher level of importance of how we can look at those best practices and move forward with acknowledging, evaluating, and putting out a plan jointly to pursue the improvements that are needed. So we will do that in the near future.
Great. I think Councilman Moreno, you were next.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I'm Vivian Moreno, and I have the honor of representing San Isidro and Otay Mesa and the working waterfront for the city of San Diego. I also lived in San Isidro for 10 years and moved to Otay Mesa. So, but one of the things I wanted to say was hearing your presentation makes me prouder of myself to fight during the budget season for potential cuts in our park systems that our children utilize in the city of San Diego. So it's not fun to be fighting your mayor for cuts, but I'm glad I did because of what you're presenting today. Also, in regards to, we've been pushing, or I've been pushing here for the San Isidro, I call it the ITC, Intermodal Transit Center. Some folks call it the hub, but really it is our most utilized trolley station in the system. And I know that SANDAG right now currently has, it's in pre-design, I believe, for that plan. So happy to keep on pushing for that plan to come to fruition, to modernize our trolley system so that more folks are incentivized to jump on the trolley instead of their cars. Also, we are park deficient down in San Isidro, so fighting really hard for our buyer park, and part of that park initiative was a grant by Casa Familiar to plant more trees, maximize our oxygen down there, and also reduce CO2 emissions. So I'm happy that I've been pushing for that and welcome my colleagues to help me push for that. I know for that park, there was federal funding. There was state funding, Proposition 68 funding that came to fruition. Also, in regards to housing, the state of California had a really big push for transit priority areas. Given that the trolley is in the old Spreckles impossible desert line, that is where we have our trolley system right now. And it literally means that there's houses right next to trolleys. And then the state of California stipulates that this is the priority area. So we build more housing in these priority areas. Why? Because there's more funding. Affordable housing developers utilize the gap funding in the state of California. So it's difficult to say, you know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? When that's where the money is. We want more housing. That's the #1 priority for my community. That's what residents are asking for. The community of San Isidro has absolutely been a proponent of more housing. Just where I lived a few months ago, a lot of housing being built, which I'm a big proponent of. We're happy to put them in La Jolla. To my colleague, if we could work that out, if we could convince the state of California to change their policies in that regard. My question was, because we're implementing the Vision Zero action plan, which I get it, it's a holistic kind of, this is what we want to do. My question is, will we be giving more, I don't know how we score it, will we be giving more priority to programs such as the San Isidro Hub to help that project come to fruition faster than other priorities? Or is the vision, because the Vision Zero action plan will sit inside of the 2025 regional plan. And I understand that we have identified that, but I think it's one thing to holistically identify, and it's another thing to actually put money where our mouth is.
So that is the next agenda item, the Vision Zero Action Plan. We're going to talk about the data analysis that we've done and get feedback and input on the action plan, which one of the areas of the action plan is how we prioritize safety when we're selecting projects and the regional plan and projects to move forward.
Mm-hmm. And a big thing that we're not talking about here is the federal government. The federal government is what oversees the San Isidro port of entry, essentially. I know when Sentry was first envisioned 30 years ago, it was supposed to be, the cars were supposed to be going 5 to 10 miles per hour, not stopping. So it behooves us to really push on the federal government. As was stipulated, Mexico is a sovereign country. We can only make really strong recommendations and plead with them. It's really about what we're doing on this side of the border. So I hope that this is also being presented to our federal delegation, because that is a department within the federal government. I will say that as a council member representing communities that are impacted by the state and also the international, it's very difficult it's just a difficult position when you are being challenged by issues that you don't control whatsoever. So I would push us, and also I would welcome the presenters to reach out to our federal delegation to present these facts, because it really is, in San Isidro, one of the biggest issues is the port of entry. So with that, I will conclude my comments, Chair. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor Sanchez, I think for you next.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Orso, for being here. I've known you for a long time. Right. On this, so are we actually calling out for health to be a high goal in terms of the planning process, to be included in the planning process? Is that what we're saying here? We understand that the air quality is obviously directly linked to health issues, and especially, and we do have a pattern of building along freeways, especially for affordable housing. In North County, if I could just say that we don't have a whole lot of public transportation, so we're still very car-centric, very much in this, I want to say, jungle of trying to figure out how do we catch up with public transportation? How do we ensure the health and safety being next, right, of our communities as we continue to build? So I kind of feel that there's a bit of a disconnect. We've got, from one extreme, we've got the border, which is highly urbanized, and a lot of transportation, and neighborhoods that, like the Barrio Logan, that have really suffered because of all the, not just the traffic and the freeway, but also because of industry right next to it. How do we ensure that putting this into the planning process is going to take into consideration these different regional needs? Is that something that we'll be looking into? And so I'm assuming there'll be certain variables while we catch up in other parts of the county with public transportation.
So in terms of public health in the regional plan and how we're evaluating and measuring it, we do a comprehensive air quality analysis, and we'll be coming back with the results of all of our modeling to the board in about a month's time on the regional plan. But with public health as a goal, we'll have some specific performance measures related to public health that we'll be evaluating, and we'll be sharing the results of the analysis with all of you and the board in the coming months as we continue to model and evaluate the investments of the regional plan.
I think we put it in the balance, man, right? And we see that there's going to be impacts one way or another, and we balance what that will be. And we always want to see, and I think the presenters mentioned this, that it's sometimes is which is the least impactful and give us the most possible opportunities. And that's what the team does. They put it all on the blender and see what comes out and provide to all you leadership those options, right? And seeing what are the pluses and minuses of each option for the decision makers to make decisions based on our priorities, right? That our communities are giving us. So what we are going to do is we're going to provide that factual data and saying option A gives us this and it impacts this. And option B gives us this and impacts this. And then we just put it out for discussion to this and other governing bodies, right? Our leaders and city councils and other situations.
Right. Addressing equity issues, because
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, most of these are going to be affordable units.
Yeah. Well, the principles, right? Safety, equity, multimodality, and economic development get put in there, and decision makers need to balance all that.
Did I miss any other hand? Oh, from Caltrans, yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I just would like some more information from somebody regarding something that recently came to my attention. The Sycamore landfill is in the city of San Diego, but it's right next to Santee. And I know some residents in Santee receive CARB letters about pollution, and that's I guess what you referred to as industrial land use right next to communities. And 2 days ago, I saw that there's Senate Bill 1208 that is looking to expand the Sycamore landfill and circumvent Proposition A. So as a council member in the city of Santee, I'd like more information on that. Thanks.
And that's a APCD type of question. I'll let Domingo, if you can answer that. I actually visited and went on a field trip of the Sycamore landfill. It's very interesting, but Domingo.
Sure, we do regulate, we do regulate landfills as part of our program, and I'd be happy to touch base with you to look more closely at what kind of questions we might be able to answer for you.
And another quick question from
Real
Patel.
quick question. So
Go ahead.
the work that's being done for AB 617 in the Barrio Logan area and at the border, it's coming up with these plans, and some of them are transportation related. So are those being incorporated in the RTP? There. And so to Ms. Chavez's question, so some of the work that they're doing is going to be addressed in the RTP to help address some of the health concerns that are these plans are addressing, right? And so that's one way that we're working towards that. And then the only other thing I want to mention is, Mario, you made a good suggestion. So maybe we can look at doing an addendum to the border master plan to really focus on, that as well. So we can work together on funding something like that. Thank you.
And Councilmember Patel.
Yes, thank you. Just building off an earlier point, just wanted to clarify based on the geographical diversity of our county. I'm assuming when we look at the data, we're really looking at it from a stratified standpoint and just making sure we're taking into consideration all of the different factors that I just wanted to clarify that just based on what was asked earlier. And I'm seeing some heads nodding, so I'm assuming that's accurate.
Yeah, so some of the mapping tools that we use take into consideration a number of variables. And so all of those elements are also being considered when we're identifying these communities and the challenges that they have.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So my question is actually for staff. There's a logical fallacy called appeal to authority. And what we saw that a lot with the COVID epidemic, where authority figures came and made comments that were specific to an agenda, to an ideology, but other voices were not allowed in that conversation. And so then when people who were not experts in medicine or experts in epidemiology would want to discuss it, they would be shouted down and say, no, the experts already told us, so there's no other voice. Completely ignoring the fact that there was a plethora of experts that had dissenting opinions. I think we've got 3 very qualified experts, but they seem to have a very narrow focus and agenda, which is anti-transportation, anti-cars, anti-freeways, anti-traditional forms of transportation. Well, that might all be well and good, but as a board member, I would like to hear all voices. I would like to know what the other side says about this, because I notice that we have as a health professional myself, I noticed that we didn't talk about the effects, health effects of marijuana, which is devastating to people. The health effects of smoking, Snickers bars, Coca-Cola. I mean, there's a lot of factors here besides blaming it all on a transportation corridor. And so I would be a lot more comfortable going back to my constituents and voting on these things that we're going to be voting on in the future based upon these kind of data, with at least being able to go on and say, well, the board had all sides and they made their decision, and at least they were informed. But when I hear a presentation like this, to me, it seems very stilted and weighted towards one side. And in the future, I'd like to have a more equitable way of dealing with this.
Thank you very well, Mayor Jones.
Thank you very much. Okay, so just kind of thinking about the implementation in the regional plan coming up, I think it would be helpful for us to have some metrics on areas that don't currently have infrastructure, and then what's happened when we actually have put infrastructure in those areas as far as walkability, active transportation, because honestly, I'll find a way to work out and get exercise, whether it's actually because like my road that I live off of, most of it does not have a sidewalk, but I still figure out a way to walk. Not everyone's like that, but there are also people that literally you put a sidewalk in and they're not going to use it. So I think when we're talking about investing, it'd be helpful to see that our investments are actually working, because, kind of back to what I was saying earlier, diet is a big part of this, but also just putting in infrastructure itself doesn't mean people are actually going to use it. If we want them to get the exercise that we're talking about, I think that would be really important to actually have those metrics that prove up what we're talking about. The other thing is when it comes to the border, do we have it broken down of what's diesel and what's automobile traffic and what's causing the pollution and how that's broken out as far as our cancer goes and our other health impacts, asthma and that sort of thing? Because I think that would be also another thing that we need to talk about, because if it's just, or if it's not just, but if it's mainly diesel, then we know that we've got to get the trucks through quicker. So maybe we try to figure out a strategy to get the trucks to move quicker, because we know that that is a big part of it. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I always try to be logical. I try to listen to the conversation and try to figure out what it is we're trying to do and how we could get there. So these are some of the thoughts that I'm actually thinking of how we can get to what we're actually talking about. So, moving forward of how we
Mayor,
implement this.
and Domingo can expand on this and others, but we, a journey starts with the first step, right? So if I'm going to go on a diet, I better go and buy me a scale, right? To make sure that I'm keeping
Some people don't even want to buy a scale. I get that.
There you go. That's an excellent point. So one thing that the state, Caltrans, and we've done with Domingo's agency, with some local community groups like Casa Familiar, we have actually worked, and SANDAG have worked on starting to put in air monitors in different key locations to get the answers of what you're saying.
So
identify
you're
the
diesel
focus
versus, okay. Yeah,
well,
that would,
to identify some of the sources, different locations, and start homing in. It's not going to give us exactly what you're wanting to get to, but it's the first step.
Right.
So we're starting to get there to identify the focal locations. And then if that focal location is more impacted or has more use of, let's say, trucks, then we can make the assumption that therefore it's the truck traffic that's generating. A little bit also happening with around the port area, and how some of the emissions are related to either the port, within the port, or within the transportation facilities near it, right? It won't be everything in the port, and sometimes the port gets hit hard for the working waterfront, and it may be another generator. So the first step, and it's been several times now, that is putting in the right monitors at the right locations that allow us to start getting to those conclusions. And teams like Antoinette's, our data team, as well as our partners at the different agencies, they get together and try to figure this out so we can bring that information, and those decisions, like you said, or strategies can be developed of where we're going to home in.
right, because if we figure out that it's mainly diesel, why would we focus all of our money and time and effort on something else? You know what I'm saying? I mean, for us to spend money wisely, which I talk about all the time, I think we need to have a better understanding. So all of that background is really important moving forward in our next plan, because we don't want to spend money on things that don't make sense. I mean, we want to spend money where we're going to get the most, the most impact. Thank you. I
Thank you, Mayor
appreciate it.
Jones.
Thanks. And I'm glad we're thinking about it, by the way.
Ms. Grove.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. We need to look at where it is we're building and why we're building. We have a lot of state requirements that say you have to do this, and if you don't, a developer can use a builder's remedy or any number, SB 330, to supersede what the local jurisdiction wants to build with density bonuses, with some regard to transportation. But are we making allowances for those impacted areas? From the age of 3 to 13, I lived in National City. If I walk by somebody who's getting a new roof on, I have a flashback, because we walk by the hot pots all the time, the diesel particulates coming from the Bay Area, from the Navy. And now we're looking at Otay Mesa East, the expansion of Brown Field, and the housing that's going to go there. So we're literally going to be moving housing out to areas that are going to cause another impact. And what used to be called gentrification is now infill. When I worked with Ms. Cooney down at Metropolitan Transit System, we share a fence line with the Monarch School, and that whole area is impacted with diesel particulates from the Navy, and the Navy's not moving. We know that. We have an airport. All of our communities have airports. I'm sitting next to Mayor Wells, and across from me is Councilmember Koval. They share that border with a significant airport out in East County. All of these airports, small and large, put out particulates. Oceanside with Camp Pendleton, you have a significant air wing up there. There are any number of issues that will impact these, and yet we have Cycle 7 coming up with HCD. I think we need to start pushing back on carving out some of these areas that are really impacted and saying these are not going to be factored in with the amount of zoning and the amount of available land, because they're already impacted for these reasons. If we're going to look at it from a sense of equity and then adjust those numbers down, how else do you look at the city of Coronado with a straight face and say, you need to build this when they have nowhere to go? And they have a flight line there, and they have the Navy there, and then they have to drive into what is effectively the impacted area down by MTS to get off the island or the peninsula. So these are all things that if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we really need to look at all of these and call the state's bluff on all this and say, let's be realistic about our housing. We've already apparently determined that we're not going to be building any further east. We're just going to impact the areas we have. So we need to start carving out those severely impacted areas and saying, this is what we can actually do, and not let the developers take over our local planning. It needs to be a good partnership, and we're not doing that right now. Thank you.
Right. Any other quick hands? We really need to move along. Dr. Frank, I do see your hand up, but I'm going to give you a question so you get a chance to speak in a moment. I want to actually go back a bit in terms of the policy that the SANDAG board actually took that got us to where we are right now. So, of course, a few years ago, the SANDAG board moved on equity, and that equity was going to be an issue. However, I was always worried that our distribution of funding, our look at what projects come to the forefront to be funded in our RTIP and in our planning process really doesn't account for equity. So I think that's something that we need to look at. But last year, we also passed a resolution at the SANDAG board to address health impacts, that the transportation plan wouldn't address health impacts. So this is my quick understanding, which I'm sure Antoinette may want to add on to. In the past, SANDAG, like most NPOs, would essentially look at transportation as people that need from point A to point B, work, where you work, where you live, and then develop a plan based on activity-based modeling and essentially work on that. And that would be the plan that would come forward. With regards to health impacts, that came in the CEQA process towards the ends. So that we dealt with 2.5 particulate matter, but that was later after we did the transportation plan as a mitigation measure, we would try to reduce health impacts. What I'm trying to propose is that health impacts be upfront in the planning process, so that when we do look at projects, we do get a rating with regards to what are the health impacts and how it's going to go, and look at the greater picture of that. We know the pollution is from vehicles, whether it be trucks or cars. And we know that the electrification is not going to save us, muchly because we know that a lot of pollutants come from just the tires and brakes of vehicles, as well as it's not going to come fast enough, plus it's extremely expensive. We need to do it as fast as we can, but it's not going to save us. We need to reduce VMT across the board in fact, we need to reduce VMT at least 19% by 2035. CARB is saying we need to reduce it by 25% per capita by 2030. So that means a 3% reduction in VMT per year starting this year. So that's the challenge that I give all my elected officials, which I know they're probably like me, and says we have a hard time just measuring it. So I think that's what we have going forward. I would also include that the resolution that passed by this SANDAG board also included the 2 regional plans we have to reduce air pollution in our most impacted communities that is worked out through APCD. That's both the MCAST and the SERP. Those are plans to reduce pollution in those most impacted communities by 2030 with specific goals. And the regional plan, this resolution calls for this next regional plan to help work with CARB and the Port District in that effort. So I think that's, I'm sorry, not CARB, but APSD. So that's what precipitated a lot of this. In the future, I hope we can look at projects and actually see what are the health impacts before we make the decisions on how it fits into our regional plan. So Dr. Frank, I have a quick question for you. And sorry, I won't give you a lot of time because we're there. Are there any other NPOs doing this kind of stuff with regards to looking at health impacts?
Yes, there are right now Sacramento, SACOG is, SCAG, LA has long history in doing this. San Joaquin is very clearly within the context of the regional transportation plan update. They're evaluating chronic disease impacts of alternative growth scenarios based on the differences across the plans for transit access, density, travel behavior, the degree to which vehicle, how much people drive versus how much they walk. But the predicted outcomes are diabetes, heart disease, obesity. All those chronic diseases have huge economic impacts. They affect workforce productivity. SCAG went so far as to actually quantify the economic benefits that come from a healthier workforce. And showed an $8.41 payback for dollars spent on active transportation. There's been Houston right now, not the MPO, but the Air Quality District has been working as well at the regional level. But MPOs, actually a big one was Las Vegas, the RTC. There they actually introduced programming criteria or are exploring programming criteria within their long-range plan, well, basically project prioritization based on health. There's more. And there's a lot of evidence. There's a number of MPOs really pushing forward in this. And I don't know exactly how, I guess that's your work to figure out how that can happen in San Diego. I'm confident you'll all figure that out. And I'm very excited to help in the process anyway that myself and my colleagues can do that.
Thank you. That's right. For us, it's good to know the information. I also want to really thank Domingo and Anne-Marie for being here. You guys added a lot. Actually, this information I think I have known for a while. To hear it again, it's really disturbing and really is a call for us for action. With that, thank you for this was a long topic. We need to go to the next part of it, which is safety. So, Antoinette, please move us ahead to the next item.
Actually, Sam Sanford is going to come up and do the presentation now on safety.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sam Sanford. I'm a senior regional planner in the regional planning team here at SANDAG, and I get to provide an update on safety planning efforts within our agency. So continuing on the public health aspect of the panel before, now we're going to look more at traffic safety and obviously impacts on health that way. As far as kind of reminder of where we've been before for Transportation Committee, the last time I was able to come to that group and provide an update was just this past December. For Regional Planning Committee, it's been a little while since September, and I've never had the pleasure of being able to present to the Borders Committee. So with that, I want to go over a little bit of background on this planning effort, starting from really the first major step was the SANDAG Board of Directors adopting a Vision Zero resolution. This was back in July of 2022. And that really set the stage for us to look at fatal and serious injury crashes across the entire region. And to see these crashes not as inevitable accidents, but as preventable incidents, as a major change in how we're looking at traffic safety across our region. And this is really aimed at all the local roads and highways that run through your jurisdictions. And all the population, our friends, our family, our constituents that are traveling, getting to work, doing their typical day-to-day commute or travel patterns. So with the partners of Caltrans, the city of Vista, and the La Jolla Band of Luiseno Indians, the region was successful in winning a grant from U.S. Department of Transportation called Safe Streets and Roads for All. With that grant, we're developing a regional safety plan, calling it a regional Vision Zero action plan, and then 2 comprehensive safety action plans. One the city of Vista is leading for their area, and one for the tribe, La Jolla Band of Luiseno Indians. And so those will be used also as models for other jurisdictions that want to follow the same path and develop these types of plans. And I should note, some of the jurisdictions in this room already have these plans, are well off and running and doing a great job. We're setting up this process for others that can use the help, or we can help support. So I just mentioned that the Region 1 planning dollars, but I do want to mention that this grant of $1 billion a year from U.S. Department of Transportation includes capital dollars, implementation funds for areas that have a qualifying plan. And that's one of the major aims of the regional Vision Zero action plan, is to make all jurisdictions and all tribes eligible for these funds in future cycles, eligible for capital projects to build projects. So that's one of the key pieces. Now, in addition to projects, the plan is also looking at policies and programs, all with an aim to getting to zero fatalities on our roadways. So today, I'll cover updates on the data analysis side and then present 2 safety networks that we've worked on using these data. This may look familiar to some of you. You've seen, especially on the Transportation Committee, you've seen this before. But I wanted to say that one of the first steps of really any planning effort, but we need to pull all the data together in one location, vet the data, make sure we understand its strengths. And that's what we did, and we made this public as well. So what we're looking at right now is just a screenshot of a traffic safety dashboard, and it takes the data that an officer completes when they arrive on the scene of a crash, and they have to tabulate down what the collision factors were, all the conditions that were present at the time of the crash. That information is put into a map-based and chart-based interactive platform that the public can then go to, that jurisdictions can use for their analysis. You can filter by mode, by location, and many other variables, and better understand what's happening in the region. So somebody can go in and check their neighborhood out, or check out a jurisdiction or a tribal area. That's all loaded in this site. So I wanted to highlight this resource, and then also acknowledge that this is the base data that was used in the Vision Zero action plan elements that we're undergoing right now. So from this, we're able to glean some insights as far as what the roadway characteristics, about behaviors and land characteristics, and how those shake out with our highest severity crashes. So I'm focusing primarily on fatal and serious injury crashes, which is the focus of Vision Zero. So this illustration shows several of those safety findings, how different modes, behaviors, roadway and location attributes show themselves within fatal and serious injury crashes. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I do want to highlight a few. Starting in the bottom right-hand corner, 49% of fatal and serious injury crashes occur on roads with 4 or more lanes. So nearly half of fatal crashes occur on that configuration of roadways. Moving to the center of the graphic, 27% of auto-only fatal and serious injury crashes involve a driver under the influence. So this brings in the behavior aspect. We are humans, we make mistakes, we need a system that can accommodate those mistakes without the loss of life. Moving to the left, pedestrians are only involved in 7% of crashes, but account for 23% of fatal and serious injury crashes. And this gets to the vulnerable user aspect, where there's a lot of investment on vehicles to protect the occupants. Now, seatbelts have been around for a while. Now, airbags are very standard. We have forward-facing radar and automatic braking systems. But for those outside, there are no standards for protecting non-occupants, the pedestrians, and they're overrepresented in crashes. So this is included in the slides that you guys should have access to look at all the other details, but we take these attributes and the base data and developed 2 safety networks. So on the left, or we see the two networks on the top row here of this diagram. On the left-hand side, we have the Regional Safety Focus Network. This is a historic look at where crashes occurred in the past, particularly those highest severity crashes, and it looks for concentrations of those crashes across our network. On the right-hand side, Systemic Safety Network. This is more of a proactive, risk-based assessment of the transportation system. It looks at features that have a strong correlation with high-severity crashes, and then finds where you have multiple of those features in one location. And that kind of increases the risk of a high-severity crash occurring in that location. So let's first look at the Regional Safety Focus Network and what that tells us about our region. So this network was able to identify that 54% of all fatal and serious injury crashes occur on just 6% of the transportation network. I'm going to pause there, let that sink in. So over half of our fatal and serious injury crashes occur on only 6% of our network. Oftentimes, one of the biggest stumbling blocks or hurdles with starting something is to know where to start. And with our region having over 10,000 miles of non-freeway roadway, that's a lot to figure out where should we start investing our finite dollars. We have limited resources. We need to know where to start. So this takes those 10,000 miles and helps us understand the 600 some odd miles that are the highest challenge areas. Within that same network, 59% of fatal and serious injury crashes involve a pedestrian are included, 54% for cyclists, and 49% for youth and senior fatal and serious injury crashes are included in that network. So what does it look like? So here's a map of the region with the dark lines representing the composite safety focus network. What I mean by composite, to develop this, the project team looked at modes separately. So we did look at pedestrian fatal and serious injury and suspect serious injury crashes, then the same for cyclist, motorcyclist, and motor vehicle crashes. Pulling all four of those modes together is what results in this map here. And so this is the 653 miles of the network. So right now, I'll pan through 4 slides that show the modes separately, so you kind of see the distribution across the region. So starting with the pedestrian, you can see kind of these yellow-orange lines. There's quite a bit in the southern section of the county with some highlights in North County and some inland. When I pan over to the cyclist safety focus network, you can see a lot along the coastal and some other cities pop up as well. And then on motorcycles, there's quite a bit of distribution across the entire region for where these fatal and serious injury crash concentrations occur. And then last is motor vehicles. Again, good distribution across the entire region. That first map that I showed you with the black lines is a composite of all 4. If we stacked all 4 of those together, that's where we got the black lines. So there are segments that might only appear, on one of these networks, like the pedestrian safety focus network. But there are lots of segments that have 2, 3, and 4 modes included on them. So we go through a prioritization process with this 653 miles to find priority locations, sharing that with your staffs, so they have all the background data on how this was developed and what the locations are. Changing now to the second network. This is the systemic safety network. And again, this is the one that's proactive. It's looking at where crashes can occur or have a higher risk for occurring in the future. Listed on the left-hand side are some of the risk factors that we were included in this. And this is based on the assessment of the data for our region. So roadway classification, number of lanes, posted speed limit, intersection type. If a section has one of those characteristics, that does not raise to the level to be on this network. But if it has 5 of those, then that's a candidate for being on this network, which includes both segments and intersections. So there are segments of this network that will overlap with that historic network. But what I find very interesting and compelling, and we're providing all this to your staff, is the segments that do not overlap with that historic crash network. Those are areas where we can get ahead of a crash or the risk of a crash in the future and do investments early on, as opposed to being reactive, we can be proactive for that segment. So in addition to all the analysis that's been going on and development of those networks, staff has been working on actions. This is an action plan. We're coming up with policies and program recommendations, as I mentioned before. And these actions are structured in a way to really complement what SANDAG as a region, as an agency does. That way, safety is brought in and institutionalized throughout the agency as well. So as today, we are known for convening and coordinating lots of groups. And so this is a great example of that, and sharing information. So we want to take advantage of that. That's first and foremost. Advocacy where appropriate for advancing safety. Planning, so bringing this into the regional plan. Vision Zero started as an implementation, near-term implementation action with the 21 regional plan. Now it is a goal area for the 25 regional plan and will continue as an implementation action. So it's integrated into that piece. On the funding side, looking at funds that SANDAG administers, and seeing if there are criteria that can be updated to reflect the new knowledge that we have about safety and advanced safety, education of the public, of our roadway users, evaluation of our system, of projects, and then implementation of projects as well. So next steps include the development and launch of an online toolkit for local agencies and tribes with all the safety data that I've been panning through these slides, and all the prioritization elements behind that, the public input. We've received thousands of comments from the public that all are kind of geolocated, so staff can get in and see what the public has referenced in a certain area, and also countermeasures, essentially the safety solutions that staff are looking for options to implement. So that part is underway. We're looking to wrap up the Vision Zero action plan later this fall, and then get straight into implementing that plan and the actions that I mentioned earlier. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide these updates, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Sam. We're going to take any comments or questions for Sam from any of the board members here. Mr. Councilman LaCava.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I think it's really important. It's one area that we can, I think, make a direct correlation between what we're seeing on the ground and some of the tragedies and an action plan. One of the questions I have, because I struggle with this at the city of San Diego, is sometimes Vision Zero projects become very big, which means it's very expensive, means very disruptive, and as opposed to doing quick build projects. Pacific Beach, which dovetailed with my comment earlier that we have every form of mobility, shows accidents in every format. We had a difficult intersection, and we came in, we threw some stop signs, we threw some bollards, boom, it was a safer intersection. We have a longer term project to fix the pedestrian safety, but will SANDAG be looking at quick build solutions so that we can get as much on the ground as fast as possible?
Thank you for the question. So the toolkit that I mentioned will have these safety solutions or countermeasures, suggestions for local jurisdictions, and generally they start with that lowest cost, high impact countermeasure, and then build from there. So the idea is that you start with those lowest cost, high impact ones, and if that resolves the concerns, if that helps, then done. But if not, then there's stages to move on from there to more advanced and possibly more costly measures, but starting with the less expensive ones.
Great, thank you.
Kranz.
I appreciate seeing the data. It's something that the city of Encinitas has been focused on Vision Zero for a while, and it's great to have a regional approach as well. So thank you for that, and I appreciate this board's commitment to that. I had the opportunity to participate in a fire engine push-in recently of a brand new fire engine that was replacing another fairly new fire engine that was destroyed following a response to a crash on the freeway on I-5, and the fire engine approached the crash, and then not long after he stopped with the apparatus somewhat perpendicular to the freeway lanes, the engine was destroyed by a drunk driver who was also killed. And so, I point this out because the impacts that we heard in the previous presentation about health of having a freeway running through your city is that your first responders are frequently responding to crashes that are in this interstate highway corridor, and it's a burden on our community. Would we have the same number of fire stations without the 5? I assume we would, but the work that our firefighters and other first responders do is definitely, the result of a regional burden of this infrastructure. So I appreciate the efforts and the continued collection of data that supports us taking steps to address these safety concerns. Thank you.
Any other comments? If Councilors, yes.
Sorry, I just want to just put a plug in. Sam's hard work and identifying these areas in these plans help make our communities eligible for funding. And I just want to highlight that the Highway Safety Improvement Program is open for call for projects to help address safety. And we are doing a workshop to help our local partners next week. So if you're interested or haven't heard about that, it's on the 28th, I believe. We're doing one in San Diego County and one in Imperial County. So I'm just putting a plug for that. Just related to that. So that work makes you eligible for this funding program. So if you're interested and haven't heard about it, please contact me.
Thank you, Roy. Anyone else? If not, we could take public comments on item number 9, which includes both the earlier presentation and the one on safety.
Thank you, Chair. We do have public comment on this item. Truth will be first, followed by B. Mittermiller.
You know what else takes oxygen from people's lungs? 60 seconds to speak. Now I heard zero rationality and 100% delusion in that first presentation. It said, densification causes pollution. Who cares? Do it anyway. And I was right. GHGs are just like COVID, invisible killer dots. Great. 6 months ago at Borders, I gave the idea of air purifiers everywhere, and now the county's actually doing it. Except for those in government meetings, there's no excuse for Americans to be fat. I know, about a 60-pound weight loss from what I used to be. But I want to know what's being done to address pollution or the tons of litter at the southern border from those crossing illegally. And related to the vision of zero cars plan, what's being done to address the increasing lithium battery fires? Lithium extraction harms the environment, pollutes surrounding communities, and there's a new fire every week. It's landfills, battery storage sites, buses, or cars. They're highly combustible, and their fires emit toxic fumes full of deadly chemicals like hydrogen cyanide, putting firefighters in every community at risk. They require thousands of gallons of water put out. The runoff water is hazardous waste, and the batteries still reignite. No solution.
Our next speaker will be B. Mittermiller, who will be followed by Timothy Bilash.
Good morning, committee chairs and committee members. My name is B. Mittermiller. I volunteer for San Diego 350. Thank you to the guest speakers for their excellent presentations earlier. I'm speaking today to express strong support for Resolution 2024-4, this health policy, which should definitely be incorporated in the 2025 regional plan, is long overdue in addressing the harm to citizens' health from historic car-centric transportation planning in San Diego County. The information on our community's deteriorating health is clearly dangerous and tragic. SANDAG staff has the ability to improve our transportation system in the 2025 regional plan to meet state mandates for greenhouse gas reduction and thereby improve everyone's health. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Timothy Bilash, who will be followed by Blair Beekman.
Good morning. My name is Timothy Bilaashka. I'm in coastal San Diego. Thank you to the committees that are here, the staff, the public that's attending. I am a physician and a clinical physician and research scientist over many years. I've spoken to you before. Today, I want to have a reach out to Mario also to welcome him to SANDAG. He's a distinguished person in his own right before he gets here. Thank you for taking the position. Long commutes are not only producing particle matters, which I'm really glad to see included potentially in the regional plan. These small particles get into the lung and get absorbed, and they are reactive. But there's also a correlation between poor diets and people who take long commutes. So I have a reach out to Mayor Jones, to Vice Chair Chavez about these other issues, and their comments I take to heart. So corn products and fructose as dietary and
Your time has
production
expired.
are toxic.
Our next speaker will
Be
be
included.
Blair Beekman, and Blair will be our final speaker on this item.
Thank you. A lot of good suggestions and ideas to address an overall difficult issue. I think we really have to be considering how can we more talk about the future of car use. We have to talk about single passenger use. We have to talk about those things in our future. I know Southern California is incredibly car-centric, but we have to have those conversations. And then from that, an openness in what was talked about here in a bunch of different ideas, how to better address issues. How can San Diego address its port issues to work towards less fossil fuels? We can address, the Naval Center, its relations to, say, Long Beach Port, Oakland Port. Oakland has done some really important work around their port issues to address what you're talking about here today. So an overall good luck to our issues, and good luck with Vision Zero, that you address tech accountability practices, and that places like Guadalajara, Mexico have been very great examples in broad pictures of what Vision Zero can be.
Thank you. That concludes concludes the public speakers on this item.
Thank you, Francesca. We're going to move on to item number 10, which will be presented by Jennifer Williams and Kate, Chris, and dealing with flexible fleets. But I want to point out something on the agenda first. I want to take the note that the agenda paragraph should have stated that, but it was a misprint on the agenda. The staff from SANDAG and NCTC, TD, is presenting a current pilot projects, a few new flexible fleet funding programs that is under development, and efforts to proactively plan for the next generation of flexible fleets and advanced mobility. So thank you very much, Jennifer. It's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was
going to introduce by Antoinette.
Thank you. So this is another two-part item fully focused on flexible fleets, which I think is a topic that we're all really excited about in the region. So flexible fleets first made their appearance in the 2021 regional plan, and they're playing an even bigger role in the 2025 regional plan. But there's a lot of work already underway to implement flexible fleets across the region. Some of that work being done by SANDAG and some of it being done by the partners in the region. So Jennifer is going to kick things off to really focus on all of the good work that's being done to implement flexible fleets, also collect data, share data on how they're performing. And we're really excited to have Chris Orlando from North County Transit District here to talk about the microtransit pilot projects that they are currently launching. But because the regional plan is really long range and goes out to 2050, we also have to be thinking about new modes, new technologies, and that's where advanced air mobility comes in. I like to think of that as the next generation of flexible fleets. And you may be thinking, is that crazy to be thinking about? What role do we play as local government agencies and flying cars? And you'll learn a lot in this presentation about how it is really important for us to be proactively planning and thinking about that. So we got a grant from Caltrans to develop a strategy on advanced air mobility. And Kate McCulley, who's got a lot of experience in this area, will be providing that presentation. And we want to get your feedback today on the regional strategy, because it's really meant to be a tool for you to use to incorporate this new mode into your own plans. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Williamson. I'm your Deputy Director of Mobility Planning here at SANDAG. And I get the honor of talking to you about flexible fleets. We know that this is one of the SANDAG's favorite projects. So with that, let me go ahead and step you through it. I need the clicker. Is it? Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. Oh. So flexible fleets are really a shared mobility service that is largely utilized as an application to get a vehicle. So if you think about Uber and Lyft, where you would use a phone to call or to schedule a service to come and pick you up, a lot of these services are very much like that. But how are they used? I think that's the more important question for you. When we think about flexible fleets, we think of them as first mile, last mile application, getting you to and from transit to your work or to your employer. We think of them as short trip making. So if you're just going to hop over to the grocery store, if you need to get over to a education facility, that's another use for a flexible fleet service. And then finally, there's some micro mobility like scooters and other smaller services that are used, again, for very short trip making in very usually denser areas. So SANDAG in 2019 adopted the Flexible Fleet Strategic Plan, and that was kind of a blueprint for us on how to roll out the flexible fleet services. Since then, SANDAG's been really busy with all of the jurisdictions, and we partnered with 3 specific services to support some early adopters of flexible fleets. There's the Oceanside Go Side service, and we partnered with Visit Oceanside, which is a tourism agency in Oceanside, to go ahead and roll this out. And it's a neighborhood electric vehicle. So that's something that operates very small, 6-passenger, operates on streets that are 35 miles an hour and below. And essentially it's providing that connection in, downtown Oceanside to more visitor applications. We also partnered with the City of San Diego on the Pacific Beach Beach Bug. And here, this was part of our Mid-Coast mobility strategy. We knew that getting from the Balboa station, the Mid-Coast station, over to the beach was going to be problematic for some people. So we implemented the Pacific Beach Beach Bug in conjunction with the City of San Diego. And it's been really successful in getting people in and around from transit, which is the largest trip that happens on the beach bug, over to the beach, but then also for a lot of smaller trips that happen in that really congested area. And then finally, Southeast San Diego. Southeast San Diego is one that we are working on right now with our community-based organizations to roll out a microtransit service. This is a little bit different, bigger service, wheelchair equipped to make smaller trips around Southeast San Diego. And we'll be rolling that out later this year. But even bigger than the SANDAG supported services are all the services that you guys are doing. And these are pretty exciting because SANDAG plays a role here as part of that flexible fleet strategy that I talked about earlier. We also provide a lot of data collection. We provide technical expertise on developing grant applications so that you guys can get money to go ahead and implement these yourself. We also have a bench of providers, and this has probably been the biggest game changer for the organizations because you can come to SANDAG and contract directly with our bench of providers to provide these types of services. And we know that not one size fits all for the flexible fleet services. There's a wide variety of the neighborhood electric, small 6-passenger vehicles, the bigger, 12-passenger vehicles that are going to be operating in some areas. And then also some of these upcoming services that are going to use a CARB funding source called Clean Mobility Options. And SANDAG worked with your jurisdictions to go ahead and help them develop these applications so that they could apply for funding, and they were very successful. So we're super excited that these services are also rolling out. Right now, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Chris Orlando because he is going to tell you about a new option in North County that's going to adopt flexible fleets.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. I am Chris Orlando, Chief Planning and Communications Officer for North County Transit and Interim Chief Operation Officer of BUS. I want to talk to you today about our microtransit pilot program, NCTD Plus.
So just a little bit about what this service is. So this is an app-based on-demand flexible fleet service. It offers same-day trips anywhere within a defined geographic zone. This service is intended to really increase mobility within that zone, but also serve as a really important first and last mile connection for our transit centers and our other transit services. So before I talk about the service specifically, I want to talk a little bit about where this fits in the spectrum of other services. So this chart here shows a comparison of moving the same 60 passengers by a variety of modes. And you'll see sort of the proportions here. And these icons are proportional to the actual cost. So what you're looking at are the actual numbers. And the point of this isn't to say one of these modes is better or worse than the other. It's just to say that it's important as we implement these modes, we understand the use case for them and that we're thoughtful about how we implement them. So a little bit about how we're implementing NCTD Plus. We looked at 14 different potential zones within our service area, and we did an analysis on each of those zones on these factors to determine which of the zones was most suitable for microtransit service. And this included equity. We wanted to make sure that we were putting the service in communities where it was most needed. Transit connectivity, where did it connect to our existing infrastructure really well? Could the service be efficient in that area? Meaning, could we run a service that had pickup times that made sense, that provided convenient services? And then points of interest. Were there generation drivers, large uses, local uses that would create trips for the service? So that's how we decided where we would put it. We are implementing this service in a series of 12-month pilots. Those pilots will be staggered in their implementation. Our goal is to assess those pilots after they're implemented to determine how they're working, what the learnings are from those use cases. So there'll be an evaluation and monitoring period. And then while we're conducting the pilots, we'll be out seeking additional funding so that we can perhaps extend the existing pilots that we've identified or do pilots in some of those other zones that we haven't identified as the initial launches. So these are our initial launch zones, and you can see the timeline here. We've staggered them to make sure that we can, because right now these services are funded through our operating budget. So frankly, we've staggered them so that we can swallow them within our operating budget. And so that's why you see them spread out over the course of a couple of years. But San Marcos in June, followed by Vista in April, Fallbrook after that, and then Oceanside in October of 2026. So we were very pleased last Monday to launch our San Marcos service. Thank you, Mayor Jones and Councilmember Musgrove for joining us. The San Marcos zone is about 10 square miles within the center of city of San Marcos. It includes Palomar College, Cal State San Marcos, Kaiser Hospital, Scripps facility, 2 high schools, and 4 Sprinter stations. So for us, this is an ideal place where we would like to implement microtransit. It's been up a week and a half. We have well over 500 users of the app so far. So we're very excited, particularly as the Palomar and Cal State schools get back into school this August. So that's an overview of the service, and happy to take questions.
So I have some good news. I have some good news for you all, that we have another pot of money that you voted on as part of the October a budget amendment that we did, and you allocated an additional $5 million to continue the pilot program for the flexible fleet services. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to roll out another round of pilot programs. And we're looking at a 2-step process. The first step is kind of meeting the requirements that you see on the screen in front of you. Essentially, you have to be a local jurisdiction, would be a partner with a lead applicant or somebody who can meet our federal provisions, because our money is federal in nature. And then expenses, looking at what are the cost of the program, where are we spending the money? What are you proposing to spend the money on? We'd like to widen this a little bit from just service to some of the other features of service that allows you to collect data, the software, hardware associated with app-based delivery, and then also any kind of supportive infrastructure. The pilot minimum and maximum that we're proposing is based on what we've learned to date. Essentially, you know, if we roll this out for 1 year, we found that $100,000 can roll out a year's worth of service partnered with another agency to provide an additional support for that service, a maximum of $700,000. So if it's a wider area, if you're looking at going up to the full 3 years, we think $700,000 is going to be a good chunk of that ability to deliver that project. Again, we want to spread this service out so that we can get a number of different projects in different areas to support the pilots. Our goal is really, let's see how it works in a variety of areas under a variety of scenarios. So that's what we're going to be looking at. The second piece of the puzzle, though, is the criteria. Just what Chris went through with you a minute ago on all of the eligibility they looked at in the different areas to develop their program, we're looking at here. We want to know what you think, and that's kind of why I'm here today, for the project selection, the step 2. You know, is it going to be equity? Do we want to have equity as the largest criteria? We took this to the Mobility Working Group and the Flexible Fleet Task Force, and they told us what they really think is going to be important is sustainability. So the ability for the jurisdictions or the partner agencies to support this after SANDAG's funding runs out. The integration with transit is really important. We've seen that with the flexible fleet services that 30+% of all trips are going to that transit destination, just as we had hoped. And so we're really seeing some of that first mile, last mile service. And that's something that we want to continue. Some of the other things that we heard was, does it reduce GHG? Is it helping us meet our climate goals? And then finally, data collection. You know, let's do the service and get the data so we know if it's something that we want to sustain here in the region. So those are just some ideas for you guys to noodle on. And we are looking at getting some feedback, or hoping to get some of your feedback today on what you think would be important as we move this project forward to the next round. So here's our schedule. We've been out and about right now to, as I said, the Flex Fleet Task Force, the Mobility Working Group. We're here today to get your feedback. And then we're looking to come back in the fall of this year to bring you our criteria, that second step process, and we'll go through the same group. And then we're hoping to get the call for projects for the new round out in late fall or early winter, and then select the projects, some of the projects in spring of 2025. So that's kind of where we're at. And I'm excited because we get to do a whole nother round of this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kate, who's going to tell you a little bit about our Advanced Air Mobility Project.
Good morning, Kate McCauley with the Strategic Partnerships team on the planning in the planning department. What is advanced air mobility? Advanced air mobility, or AAM as we refer to it in the industry, is one form of emerging flexible fleets. AAM is an evolving market within the aerospace industry, exploring the novel use of aircraft to provide additional aerial transportation for people, freight, emergency services. These vehicles range from the idea of Jetsons, the cars of the future, to things like drone delivery. SANDAG is exploring AAM integration as a second wave adopter alongside our partners at the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority through a Caltrans planning grant, so that we can assist jurisdictions throughout the region begin navigating their localized planning processes. While many believe that this technology is really far off, we've been conceptualizing flying cars since the 1950s. And it's here. It's coming down the pipeline. These vehicles are entering the market globally, and so we are ready to start preparing here in the region. Some early deployments include things like this picture at the top. This is a Joby Aviation AAM vehicle. It's what we in the industry would refer to as an electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. These are going to be vehicles similar to these will be deployed through the 2024 Summer Paris Olympics. Those lessons learned will be coming back to the Federal Aviation Administration and the 2028 Los Angeles Summer Olympic Planning Commission to really start to figure out how we could leverage this technology to maybe move spectators or athletes from their respective accommodations to wherever their performances will be. below, and this is exciting because this is actually a photo that was taken here within our region. 2019, we did a demonstration with Uber Elevate under the San Diego Integration Pilot Program. We delivered chicken nuggets, which are in that box there on the bottom of the drone, from Bayside Park in Chula Vista over to the Coronado Cays to the former city council member, Bill Sankey from Coronado. So very exciting. These are things that are happening within our region. So this is relevant. This is here. AAM is incredibly complex, as you can see right here. These are the components that go into AAM, all of the considerations from aircraft and airspace, which are being really developed out by our partners within the region, original equipment manufacturers, service providers, and the likeness. And where SANDAG is most concerned is over here to our right, highlighted in pink, the supporting infrastructure and policy components. SANDAG, under our collaborative initiative, we work alongside our original equipment manufacturers, our federal regulators, and other stakeholders to help inform the aircraft and airspace components, while we then take those components back and try to understand how we're going to feasibly integrate them into this final array. So some land use and infrastructure considerations, because that's really what SANDAG is focused on, right? And we have to start prepping today, because as the aircraft come down the pipeline, we want to make sure that we have the infrastructure prepared. Just like in the past, we know that we rolled out scooters, but we have the opportunity to rectify such kind of calamities, if you will, in making sure that we are ready and prepared with the infrastructure to go. So what we're calling essentially the landing pads for AAM vehicles are VERTA something, VERTA hubs, VERTA ports, and VERTA stops. A VERTA hub is actually one example of an infrastructure concept that is being considered for AAM vehicles. It's something that can be equated to something like a transportation investment zone that would be specifically designed to accommodate an AAM vehicle. As you recall from the last slide, there are so many components that must be considered within the infrastructure build out that range from things like connectivity to electrification and perhaps hydrogen fueling in the future, depending on the way that renewable energies go. So how we're envisioning this is phase one of our program. We kicked this program off in October, and the way that we are slow rolling it is really to try to understand where we exist today within our region, what is our current state of condition, and how do we ensure that we take slow steps to begin to integrate this appropriately and thoughtfully and very intentionally. Mayor Jones, frequently you talk about how we need to be very cognizant of how we are spending our money. And so we want to make sure that every single thing is incorporated prior to really deploying any infrastructure projects. So thus, SANDAG has established a policy framework, or we are establishing a policy framework that will cover things like zoning and ordinance considerations for operations, land use integration, and addressing permit streamlining at a local level. The impending strategy will provide critical tools that you can incorporate from your lessons learned from other jurisdictions. Again, inputs from other original equipment manufacturers and service providers and various subject matter experts from secondary support industries that will be pivotal in the success of AAM integration. The AAM SANDAG team pulled together a guiding principles document, which is attached to today's presentation that you can have a look at if you're interested in the way that we are providing guidance to our regional and our external stakeholders so that we can continue to come back and align with the values of our region within this program. Some of the things that we have highlighted here, as you can see, are environmental sustainability and economic viability, as well as equity, public benefit, and engagement. SANDAG deliverables. Again, this project kicked off in October. And so we have thus far completed 2 final deliverables. The first deliverable completed was an internal industry and market assessment repository. So this is actually a living document. We've created this not just to be something that sits on the shelf, but we will continue to update this repository so that we can run high-level reports for various different considerations, which you can see by focus area on the right within the photo that's been captured here. As new white papers and materials come down the pipeline, as our team reviews those, we'll enter these in so that we can really understand a historical context and where these trends are going to lend themselves. Additionally, we have completed our AAM collaborative. This is an ongoing initiative, guiding principles that I spoke about in our last slide. Again, those are attached to today's materials. You can have a look at them if you're interested. Our next steps, we will be finalizing our 3 deliverables set forth for the remainder of the project. These include a regional policy framework, an implementation strategy, and a stakeholder and public engagement strategy. We anticipate the closeout ahead of schedule in December of 2024 so that we have some time to diligently review and ensure that feedback is adjudicated. And our next steps, I anticipate that we will be back to this board or another committee next year to get feedback on said final deliverables and looking forward to any inputs that you may have. So thank you so much and looking forward to your questions.
Is that the completion of staff reports? Let's go on to public comments on this item. Francesca, do we have any public comments on item 10?
Thank you, Chair. We do. Truth will be first, if you'd like to step up to the podium, and then Blair Beekman.
All right, advanced air mobility. I'm going to say we don't need technology that benefits nefarious big corporations that SANDAG has investments in, like Amazon, or that delivers lazy, fat people unhealthy chicken nuggets. I don't even want to see a drone hovering in front of my house. I want a human to certify that the package has been delivered, and I want to ensure that people have jobs, not robots. Cities like Carlsbad are already struggling to get pilots to follow FAA guidelines about not flying low or late at night. Imagine adding a bunch of annoying noise pollution drones to that mix. And who would be responsible for accidents? And how would theft of people's packages be stopped? The criminals are just going to follow the drone, and they're going to shoot it, or they're going to hit it with a bat, and they're going to steal the package. This is another example of utopian dreamers being out of touch with reality. Stick to the overpriced toxic lithium go-karts. And make it where none of them require phones and apps to track people. But urban areas don't need microtransit when they have public transit. And MTS and NTCD don't need competition, but the rural unincorporated areas do need microtransit. And how do I get one of those money pots that should be given out to everyone equitably? Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Blair Beekman, and Blair will be our final speaker on this item.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks a lot for this item. These are ideas that seem a bit long range. Good luck in how to address them. I hope we're addressing more the short-term ideas of electrical vehicle use in terms of battery usage. I guess you guys have probably figured there's at least 2 or 3 different types of batteries in the market right now. That one of them's doing the really dangerous and exploding a lot. The other ones are not as much. I hope we're making that sort of change and transition to do that. And to also note, the Tijuana River Valley has a lot of particulate matter problems as well as overall issues of addressing the future of dirt and our healthy lives. Thanks a lot.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you, Francesca. Any comments or questions from any of the board members here? I'm sorry. Let's go with Supervisor Anderson.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. When people are using the electric vehicles downtown as part of the pilot program, is there any kind of a customer satisfaction survey?
Yes, so that's operated by Circuit, and we do work with them on, it's voluntary, their customer satisfaction, but they do have a site on their website to measure customer satisfaction. SANDAG doesn't partner directly for the downtown service, though, so they would need to go directly to the website.
With the folks that we're partnering with, though, are they great? And then I apologize, I'm sure it's somewhere and I missed it. How do people call in order to get access to use the service?
So we have a call center that you can call if you don't have the web-based app. So really the best way to do it would be to use the app and just like Uber or Lyft, go ahead and order a car via the app. But if you don't have that capability, we also have a telephone call center that you can call into to schedule the trip, and that is on the website and on our marketing materials as well.
Great, thank you.
Mayor Jones.
Thank you so much. I'll try to make it quick. Okay, so one thing on the advanced air mobility, love that. Love a day where not chicken nuggets, but groceries could actually be delivered and all of the other, I mean, let's face it, we all see tons of UPS trucks in our and FedEx trucks every single day. So when even just that in itself, I think would make a huge difference as far as our greenhouse gases. So on the micro transit, I would just like to figure out if it's possible where if cities like mine, like I am a huge believer of this, I'm super excited that it's happening in San Marcos. But if we can demonstrate that we've got a lot of feedback and need for an expansion of what we have, my hopes are that the monies that we actually have already set aside would not be prohibited from being used on something that's already in there. If we can demonstrate that we have the ridership based on the feedback that we're getting from the community. And I think also part of that would be if we have on our current pilot, if that's actually somewhat successful, at least. I mean, a big part of, I think ours is, for us, we've got the universities and we've got a lot of, people that will use it. It's not in use right now because they're out for the summer. But once we get back, if we can make sure that that's not prohibited to have that expansion, I think that would be a good use of the funds, and not like leaving other jurisdictions out because I think we should have this across the county. But if it's a small, just like maybe 3 more square miles or something like that, I think it would be beneficial because I look at our city, it's very hilly and you just can't use the bicycles and that sort of thing or walking. It's just not as easily used. So just taking, that into account would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Musgrove.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chris, it was great seeing you at the ribbon cutting, and we were able to take a short trip around our North City area on the NCTD Plus. And I would just say this, my issue, and I love public transportation. I was riding the bus when I was a teenager going around all over San Diego County when it was San Diego Transit, 10 cents for the local Sprint and 25 cents for the express bus. It was a long time ago. But my concern has always been it has to go where you want to go and when you want to go. And this is a clear example of that service. If you use the app, you can program into it where you want to be, when you want to be, punch that in, and it will tell you when it will come to pick you up. And then we'll pick you up and take you where you need to be. And it's not free, of course, nothing is. But I would love to see at the end of the study a cost comparison on ridership. And then some of that's going to come from user surveys. Would you have used a standard bus if this was not available, or would you have used an Uber or Lyft? And I would venture to say that the popularity will be yes, because when I needed it, it was there. It took me where I wanted to go. I didn't have to find that last mile. I was already there, and then I could program when I wanted to return. And if you start or end at one of the transit centers, your cost is cut in half. Is that still correct, Chris? And so it's extremely affordable. If you factor in the cost of gasoline and everything else, and I'm not saying it'll replace the car, but for those trips, if it was extended up to the next signal light, I could use it. So maybe, as the mayor was saying, if we go from north of Borden Road up closer to my end of town, I would be using it. But the area that we're covering is fantastic. And I think as this moves around North County, you're going to be pleasantly surprised with returns you get from your residents. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Chair Chavez first and then work my way down.
Thank you. Thank you for that very important presentation. And I just want to highlight that the border is the largest transportation hub in San Diego. And we used to have a program with Customs and Border Protection where they could cross with their bike. I think there was a little bit of an abuse at that program with that program. But I think that with a little bit of communication, we can bring it back. It was implemented a long time ago. And so any strategy that helps commuters to leave their car should be priority, especially when we are talking about a shared population, a floating population of 80 to 90,000 people crossing on a daily basis northbound because of work, study, and everything related to this. And I just want to mention that public transportation, sidewalks, bike routes, and of course, flexible fleets and the advanced air mobility has space at the border, right? We need to move forward and see how we can integrate. And like our new CEO mentioned, there's many things that we can touch base with the government south of the border to see how we can help them bring their bike and cross and keep moving towards their final goal, final destination, as well as working with MTS to see how we can be more of a partner and a resource for these people riding their bikes as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to step back a bit to Chair LaCava.
Oh, thank you, Chair Shu. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very excited. I mentioned the beach bug in Pacific Beach, which was a big hit, especially as was mentioned, the continued free connection between Pacific Beach and the Balboa Station trolley, which has proven to be both for commuters going to work using the trolley and people visiting the beach or the Pacific Beach area. So I'm excited about that. I want to make a couple of comments about sustainability, which is something I'm concerned about. I want to thank NCTD for stepping up and restoring the transit service to the Sereno Valley, the Sereno Mesa area. There is nothing that really damages, I think, the good work that we're trying to do, where we provide public transit and then we get people to change their behavior and then we yank it away. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but it may sound like it. I don't understand why we're looking at micromobility in isolation as opposed to connecting it with an existing transit service. What NCTD is doing makes a lot of sense because you can marry your operations between where do I put full buses, where do I put the coaster, and where do I put micromobility in kind of a comprehensive plan that you can actually budget for and figure out what makes the most sense for your users in your jurisdiction. Right now, it seems like we're doing a little bit of a competition between MTS and their bus service because most of the micromobility is in areas that have a lot of transit service. And I'm concerned that it's not going to be sustainable. I know Circuit has alluded that they're having some trouble. They're not getting the advertising. They're still looking for subsidies to make their system work. How do we do a better job of really connecting our transit and our micromobility into one comprehensive solution as opposed to these one-off programs?
That's what the pilot's for. So we as I heard earlier, we know we have to take a step in the right direction. And so micromobility is new to the San Diego area, and actually integrating it into our transit system is something that we're really cognizant of for this upcoming regional plan. We've taken micro transit, or the NEV, the micro transit, into our regional plan, and we analyzed it to look at how it can serve as a complementary feature to our fixed route services. So I think when we bring you back that network, you're going to see that we've been working really hard at doing just what you said. What's going to be difficult, though, is finding the funding. And what Chris alluded to earlier is that microtransit, NEVs, microtransit, the smaller, the bigger, it just takes more money because you have more drivers, you have more operations to kind of fund. So that's something that we're going to be looking at. But we're doing a significant effort to integrate both flexible fleets and transit together so you get that system that you're talking about.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. And Mayor Sanchez, then we'll go to.
Thank you very much to Chris. I saw the press release about the pilot project for NCTD, the micro, that was starting off at San Marcos, and I got immediately jealous because it did refer to 3 other cities and only referred to 2. And I was like, is Oceanside going to be the 3rd one, or, the 4th one for? So you mentioned Oceanside today. Is that for real? Is that definite?
That is for real. Yeah. Pending
That's for
funding.
real.
That is for real. Yeah. And,
Okay. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And just to say that we do have the O side for the downtown area. And certainly we're trying to figure out how to not have cars driving up and down the downtown and then south, going to South O to all these other places. So this shuttle has been really wonderful to include O-side, to include 2 barrios that are, just on the other side of the freeway. It's been really, really wonderful. And so I certainly appreciate, I want to say very much that you've included Oceanside in the other program, because on the other side of that is we have significant, as you know, significant gaps in transportation and public transportation. And we have a lot of kids, we have a lot of adults and youth who would love to get to Maricosta. And a lot of our seniors who would love to be able to get to the hospital. And it's just very difficult to put things together to be able to get there within, 2-3 hours. So it's really wonderful. Thank you very much for choosing Oceanside. And I hope we learn a lot from it. And I hope that learning a lot means that we will actually increase or improve the transportation between these places so that we can be more efficient in getting people around. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Councilmember Coble.
Yeah, hi. I'm not sure if the right people are still in the room, but earlier we talked about the copper line change in Santee between El Cajon and Santee, and then this micro transit. And I'm just wondering if micro transit was considered as an option versus doing the copper line. From my perspective, in Santee, Mission Gorge Road is our busiest road in the city, and Cuyamaca, which the trolley goes right through the center of, the second busiest road in Santee. And there's only one stop in between those two locations. I mean, there's no stops. It's just the end of the line, really. And in between those two stops, there's our hospital. So I would imagine that people have to either get off early or get off late and come back to the hospital if that's their ultimate destination. And micro transit might be a better solution. And then actually you could expand on that and get people to where they ultimately want to go around the city. So just wondering if that was considered.
I don't know, Executive Director Cooney, did you want to respond to that?
Well, it would be thousands of trips. And so we wouldn't want to do that. And the cost of a trolley trip per passenger is significantly lower than what the cost of one of these micro transit services. We have the infrastructure already. It just, micro transit could make sense. And I think it's already been expressed in places where we don't have existing, like I saw Fallbrooks on there, that's a perfect example, but where you already have the infrastructure in place for high occupancy transit with high use. That's why we're going to continue to use the trolley to go between El Cajon and Santee.
Is it high use between El Cajon and Santee?
It's higher use than you would see on one of these micro transits. I mean, does anybody have an expectation or an estimate of how many riders a day would be using one of these services?
I can tell you for PB or Oceanside, we generally get about in a month, 1,700 rides. And so I'm assuming that the copper line probably is serving over 1,700 riders a day. Yeah.
And I would just add, I think as Chair LaCava was pointing out, I think the trap we don't want to fall into is the either or discussion, because really the question we need to be answering is what's the right mix and what's the locality call for, and how do we leverage the infrastructure that we've already invested in? That's really where we should focus. For us, the microtransit works really well in areas like San Marcos where the infrastructure is there, but that connection to that infrastructure isn't as good as it should be. So in that use case, microtransit makes a lot of sense.
Krantz?
Yeah, great presentation. It reminded me of the constant battle of, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, with the bus slide that you had up there where you had 60 people could get in a fixed route size bus. The problem that we had in Encinitas is that you'd see a fixed route bus that had 2 people in it, so that was a little frustrating to see a nice big vehicle like that was serving so few people. It's not as noticeable when the vehicle is a little bit smaller, but one of the reasons why there aren't more people on those buses is because they're not frequent enough. And the challenge that we have in public transit is to create a dynamic where people with a choice between driving their personal vehicle versus getting in public transit is only going to be a reasonable choice when the frequency increases. So I'm concerned about microtransit and micromobility options. They don't necessarily reduce vehicle miles traveled as much as a fixed route bus does. And so, looking at ways to supplement, augment the fixed route system is really important to me. In Encinitas, we just ran a 2-year experiment with a company called B-Cycle with bike share. And at the end of the 2 years, it was the Trek owns B-Cycle. They decided to pull out because there just wasn't enough use. It was costing them too much money. So then now we get into that whole issue about how we generally subsidize public transit, and should bike share be subsidized more effectively? Should our public transit agencies embrace bike share as an option for first and last mile? I think the answer to that for me is yes. Because, for example, when B-Cycle was trying to figure out where they were going to locate their bike docks, it was complicated to make a deal with NCTD. It costs money. There's requirements that NCTD has that meant that B-Cycle was going to be charged in order to place a dock on the transit center property. So they used an Encinitas sidewalk not far from the transit center. But until the transit agencies are a partner in the bike share system, I think we're going to continue to run into difficulties. B-Cycle was looking at expanding to Carlsbad, but Carlsbad wasn't interested because, whatever, I don't know what their reasons were. But again, having a system where I can go to the park, which had docks, ride down to the train station on a share bike, get on a train and go to Carlsbad or Oceanside, get another shared bike, and it's seamless. We're not going to be able to expand the use of a system like that. And so when I see that SANDAG is now offering grant opportunities for this micromobility, I would sure like to see bike share be a part of that. Because the only thing that caused it to shut down is it didn't make it in the capitalist model. And, maybe there's enough people on this board that think that it should be able to withstand capitalist principles. And I am not one of those. I am a believer in the need to subsidize public transit so that people have a reasonable option to use it and leave their car at home. And finally, I would like to say that the AAM, to me, while interesting, I'm not sure what SANDAG's doing in that right now. So I hope, I don't remember that in the budget, but hopefully we're not spending much money on that.
Okay. Any other comments from Allison, please?
But economically, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the communities that I represent, who are low-income communities who still haven't been able even to enter into the market of the hybrid cars, much less electric cars. And actually, bikes seem much more reasonable at this point. As far as subsidizing that, I think we are very tone deaf to what's happening in our communities. If we think that investing in infrastructure for flying cars, cars that my community will never be able to afford, is where SANDAG needs to be investing in its money. Eventually it's coming, and planning for the infrastructure. I understand the need for that, but we really need, our focus needs to be, if we're looking at flexible fleets, not flying cars, but motorized bikes at this point, because people just can't afford insurance, cars, their rent, anything else right now. And so we have some of the highest credit card usage rates in the entire nation because people can't afford groceries. So I just want to really encourage options for flexible fleets that include lower income communities.
Thank you. Any other hands up. Just a quick note, sometimes I do get challenged by names, so whatever name comes to me first. So sorry, Councilman Snow, for calling you by your first name. I have a series of quick questions, and I'm going to let myself go 3 minutes past our 12 o'clock end time because we started 3 minutes late, so sorry. But I have some quick comments and maybe there can be as questions first. Chris, thank you for showing up that slide of cost versus size of vehicles. I think that's really good. Is there an optimum size? I heard for microtransit from another presentation that like 10, 15 was a better size. Do you know what number might be in terms of having the maneuverability, flexibility, as well as a good size?
Yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily an optimal size. So our vans, they're what you would consider transit vans. So they're 9-passenger. If they're ADA accessible, so if you have a wheelchair within the vehicle, it's a little bit less than that. But those have the good maneuverability as you're talking about. But there are a variety of options. So I don't know that there's an optimal size. It really just depends on the community itself.
Thank you. And another area that we've talked about before and we haven't talked about in this presentation is service to the rural areas, the tribal areas throughout our county, and the need for some type of transit system. And I've always been leery of the fixed time, fixed route services that we provide to many of our rural areas. So Jennifer, in terms of microtransit, one of the presentations we went to, or the workshops we had microtransit being served to rural communities quite effectively, and showing that it was pretty cost effective compared to our fixed routes. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. So as part of, again, that network that you're going to see for the regional plan, you'll see microtransit broadened out to serve those tribal areas as well as the more rural areas. And just recently, Ramona got $1 million as part of a clean air strategic grant from the state to operate microtransit in Ramona. So we're going to have some real-time data on how it's going to work in the more rural areas, if you will. But we are definitely thinking that, microtransit flex fleets are an option for our tribal communities.
Great. And I hope Ms. Pinto took note of that. So maybe we can combine efforts from the tribal areas, what their needs are, their funding sources, with a transit provider or some other provider, so we could team up and then really have a good service in the rural areas. Because I know Supervisor Anderson always talks about his population and the need to serve them, and I hope we move in that direction. Some other ideas. Well, let me just say that sometimes I dream. I think Sharon Cooney is worried when I dream because I think of transit and in ways that she's a little bit worried about. So I dream of a transit system, microtransit system, in which we have what is called virtual bus stops. A bus stop that is essentially anywhere that you can stop and safely let someone on and off. And not just flexibility in where they stop, but also flexibility in terms of time, service, and level of service depending on time of day. So it's a service in which you go to the app, you want to go from A to B, and that service tells you, hey, at this time of day, if you walk 5 minutes or 10 minutes in this direction, there'll be a transit vehicle that can pick you up and take you close to within 5 minutes of where you want to go. And that's done instantly through some kind of an app. And you're going to share that ride with a vehicle that holds maybe 15 people because we know we need more people in these vehicles, not just 6. But that's done virtually, with the technology we have, and done very quickly and instantly. As time changes and you got a different time of day, sorry, you're going to have to walk 10 minutes and wait maybe 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes because it's getting later in the day and demand's that high. And then lastly, when it comes to become nighttime and we don't really want people to walk very far, it gives you close to the door-to-door service, but you may have to wait a little bit longer and maybe pay a little bit more. So it's a very flexible fleet in terms of where you pick it up, where you ride, how much you pay, and what kind of service you provide, depending on the demands of that day and availability of service and number of drivers and everything else. And I hope that's what I'm hoping for, that we look in the future. Jennifer, you're smiling, so maybe you can comment on that.
I actually think we might have shared the same dream. So we have, actually last year we applied for a grant called Right Sizing Transit, where we were going to be evaluating, the system overall to figure out, is there a way to establish transit in a way that is more reflective of what the need is at the time of day, the weekend, the area, so maybe you don't need a 40-foot bus after 6 p.m. on a route. Maybe microtransit would fill that goal or that service a little bit better. So we weren't successful, but we're going to go at it again because we think that it is the kind of the future of how you want to do transit. You want to look at optimizing the dollars you have to put the service out where it's needed. And it doesn't always have to be a 40-foot vehicle. We recognize that. And as we move forward, that is something we're going to be looking at. It's important to note that the Beach Bug today uses virtual stops. So we do have some experience with that, and it's working well for our microtransit in that area. I don't know that it would work as well for our conventional transit, just because of the ADA requirements and all of the needs at the stops today.
So Chairman Hsu, I don't want to overreach and say we've made your dreams come true, but actually what you described is how the microtransit functions. And so one of the things that we've done, like the NEV, our zone in San Marcos includes a few hundred virtual stops. So it's exactly as you described, where there may be a short walk at the beginning or the end of your trip. And what that allows us to do is increase the service time, so you don't have to wait as long and those sorts of things. But what it also allowed us to do is our original zone in San Marcos was about 6 square miles. But by adding the virtual zones as you described it, we were able to increase that up to 10 square miles. And we got in areas like Lake San Marcos and a number of the mobile home parks where there's seniors who were outside the zone, but because we're able to add those virtual stops, they can have just a short walk and connect to it and do it just as you described. So that's what we're testing, and hopefully the other elements of your dream we can make come true later. But I think what you're describing is exactly how we envision it.
Great, thank you so much. I'm glad I wasn't really dreaming, but that is potential for reality. With regards to vehicles that fly or deliveries by air, I think my fellow board members expressed some of my concerns with regards to, do we really want to go that direction when we know that it may be very costly? I'm also worried about the energy cost. I think taking something, particularly if it's heavy, on wheels is probably quite a bit more efficient than if we had to take it off the ground and move it someplace. So just from an energy perspective, it may not be very good. In other ways, and it may be a good application for certain things for emergencies. I think that'd be great. If I was in an emergency, I needed something real fast, I like to have it delivered as fast as possible, and air may be the way to do it. But I'm glad that we're looking forward and being forward thinking in terms of what are the rules we want to play by as we go in that direction, so that we can we don't get caught off guard like we did with those scooters. So I think that was a great point to make. With that, I want to announce the meeting days that are coming up for the various committees and include this particular item. So the Borders Committee is scheduled for a meeting on the 28th of June 28th at 1 p.m. The next Regional Planning Committee meeting is scheduled for September 6th at 1 p.m. They're not meeting the day after 4th of July. On the 5th. So their meeting is September 6th. And the next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, July 19th at 9 p.m. here. With that, thank you all for staying and being a great, having a great meeting, and meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Great job, Chair.